So hey anime fans, the series name is What If Naruto Was the Most Dangerous Criminal in the MHA Universe, so the second part of the series. So let's start the series. No way, I get that Ishido-san is probably not the strongest competitor, but Uzumaki-san knocked her out cold in one strike. Izuku shook slightly, seeing the blonde stare down his other competition. The sight in front of him was more intimidating now than ever. When President Mike stirred the already exploding crowd, the masked blonde stood unmoving with the entirety of the stadium in the background. Their horned classmate laid limp at his feet, blood pooling around her mouth and limbs hung motionlessly. The friendly rivalry sports festival had taken a slight turn violent, and Uzumaki had the arena eating out of the palm of his hand. It almost looked like a gladiator pit, with the victor earning their viewers' respect through lethal battle. And the blue-eyed Uzumaki had flipped the entire confidence of the finalists into a fray. Ishido was not a slouch in physical combat, meaning she could take a hit and keep chugging onwards, yet one expertly placed kick rattled her brain into submission. A small part of him hoped that Uzumaki's deception in the early stages was just coverage for a poor quirk. However, even with a weaker quirk, judging from his devastative heel kick, Uzumaki's combat skill more than made up for it. Seeing all this, Midoriya didn't know who he wanted to fight less, Todoroki, Bakugo, or Uzumaki. Uraraka gaped bug-eyed at the blonde's quirk usage. Dekakuin, did you see his quirk? I could be wrong, but did he just use a gravity manipulation quirk like mine? The bubbly girl subsided considerably after witnessing the gruesome ending. It did look exactly like that, but gravity had no counteracting noises. Unlike the pang that rang loudly upon activation, Ka-chan has a similar quirk, but hers only makes a slight noise. Her quirk is object attraction, but even so, he moved a person not an object. Deku sadly watched as Mina was lifted into a stretcher man by two field agents. His mother's quirk was nowhere near as powerful as Uzumaki's. Uraraka-san didn't sound so far off regardless. Some sort of gravity manipulation or attraction quirk? They wouldn't know until somebody told them, or the blonde said himself. His quirk is strong though. Mina-chan went flying at him. Not that I think he's cool or anything after what he did to Mina-chan, but yeah. Denki dropped his head down from the row above them to add his thoughts. Mineta jittered crazily in his seat. He just hit a girl like it was nothing. Is he crazy or something? The pop-off quirk user chewed his fingernails indiscriminately. Kirishima folded his arms over his chest. No, I think he was taking her as any competitor would. But I agree too, does the guy seriously have no restraint? The future Red Riot smacked his fist into his hand. I mean, Aizawa-sensei did say he was a contracted villain before Yue. In a dojo my own used to compete against, their motto was strike first, strike hard, no mercy, meaning no mercy, as in defeating weak opponents the same way they would fight tough opponents. I don't believe Ishido-san is weak, far from it actually, but I presume Uzumaki does. Ojiro, the tail quirk user, summarized his own conclusion on the masked blonde's fighting style. Collectively, as a group of 1A students getting closer knit as the year went on, someone actively dismissing the integrity of their classmates was despicable. Not only did Uzumaki insult Ishido's worth, but he insulted all their own as well. Besides Todoroki and Bakugo, many believed Mina to be a tough opponent, so thinking her weak was a shot at them all. So not only is he a vigorous force, but his quirks unknowns are still hung over our heads, added on with all the silent pokes at our own classmates, and the finalists still present. We have a massive blockade in front of us, and we had no clue, because he manipulated us into playing his hand for him, Izuku theorized with a downcast look, granting many distraught looks around him. You're all letting Uzumaki-san into your head, Karo. He wants you to lose determination, because that's how he operates. Like a villain, falling for his tricks will only make us look all incompetent, Karo. Ajri, the frog quirk user, intruded upon the conversation after listening to her classmates dig themselves their own graves. She peered at Bakugo's reaction during the group's rambling and he looked about to burst with rage, whether people admitted it or not. The ashy blonde was very intelligent and most likely noticed the masked blonde's mind games getting to them all. Bakugo hated to lose, and if Uzumaki made 1A look easily flustered by substantial force, his own draft stock would deteriorate along with theirs. Stepping invisibly calmed the explosive quirk user, in a way, and as in calm, she meant the red-eyed teenager went from his boiling rage to his constant, angered expression. To her it was funny seeing the belligerently frustrated Bakugo. But Yue probably wouldn't enjoy the damages an enraged Katsuki Bakugo would leave in his wake. Ajiri-san is right. Don't mind, win or lose, Japan is still here to see us succeed. Hagakure waved her hands, signifying her belief in their success. If the finalists got lost in their thoughts, it would reflect poorly on those who didn't make it to the final tournament. If their best didn't showcase the skills she knew they had, 1A could be replaced with others they thought were more liable for the hero course. Izuku looked aspiringly at Ajiri and Hagakure. How can Ajiri-san be so level-headed? I keep making mistakes, but she is so cool. The black and green-haired boy gushed. Gazing around at his classmates, the frog quirk users seemed to calm some of their nerves. Some of them had lost themselves so far in their own thoughts that they completely disregarded the reputation they were meant to uphold. Can these two promising UA students match the previous match's intensity? The voice quirk commentator bellowed, exciting the fans below. The remaining 1A students turned vibrantly to the center stage. Many had anticipated the fight to be pretty spectacular based upon the strength of the two rivaling quirks. Yeah! From 1A we have Queen Versatility, Momo Yaoyorozu. The mohawked hero yelled. Many female heroes hastily drew their phones to add a beautiful and strong hero to in turn potentials. Standing directly across from her was her opponent, Suga. Also from the hero course 1A, the shadowy Fumikage Tokoemi. President Mike pointed two-finger guns at the proverbial camera. Fighters ready? Go! Midnight cracked her whip seductively. 10 minutes before, Class 1B sat stunned throughout the whole uncovering of Uzumaki's past discrepancies. Naruto Uzumaki, an ex-villain? Some reacted the same as the crowd, befuddled and upset, while others looked on quietly. Most of them had their chances at agency stripped from them by the blonde, only to find out he's been an indirect enemy all along. How were they supposed to react? Accepting it and moving on was easier said than done. Even with All Might's interference, they couldn't rally with the onlookers. Forgive and forget, so simple in concept, but deceivingly difficult in execution. Not only was he an ex-villain now registered in UA, but he was also registered in the course gunning for a spot in the hero course. Feeling threatened and desperate to prove themselves seemed more liable than ever. But with the few members in the finals from 1B, they all looked substantially weaker than the top course. Itsuka peered at the melancholy reaction of her class. Subduing chaos in her class was her responsibility, yet even she felt slightly betrayed by Yue and the masked blonde. Was everything some sort of ploy to defeat all the hero students? Defeat all the hero students, yes, of course. Wait. Don't blame him just yet. I get that everyone is upset, I am too. But imagine the outcome if he defeats all the 1A fighters as well. If one of the 1A students was able to defeat Uzumaki-san, then we would be seen as weaker, because we lost to a person 1A beat. However, what if Uzumaki-san beats them all? All the pointed fingers of who's stronger would recede dramatically, and neither class could claim strongest since we'd all be on the losing end. The orange-haired girl slapped her knuckle into her fist, watching dramatically as eyes recognized her claim, though for some. But we still lost. How can we demonstrate our class's superiority if we both lose? I mean Tetsu-san and Shiozaki-san are still in, you know. Monoma's face barred with disbelief and resentment. I know that, but I already thought that was a given. I'm just thinking about the best-case scenarios out of the poor situation we're in. If Shiozaki-san and or Tetsu-san make it to the finals, that would be the best option for us. But we have to consider other things as well. I just don't want us to be disappointed if another one of our wishes was snapped in two, that's all. Itsuka calmly carried on, slightly scaring Monoma for not raising her fist at him. For 1B it was hard to swallow their pride. The big fist quirk user understood perfectly how they felt about it all. Being underhanded in the lower stages by an ex-villain who happened to now be a Gen Ed student was a hard pill to swallow. Underestimating the true deceitful nature of the masked blonde left not only them, but 1A as well. Looking like fools, he targeted 1B teams in the cavalry battle. That fact was undeniable. But it seemed like he planned it all. Maybe Itsuka was reaching, but the blonde Uzumaki might have arranged to embarrass them all on Japan national television from the very beginning. Even so, you heard All Might, he really is a good person. All he needs is a chance. We all need a chance to prove ourselves fit to be heroes. But for him he has to gain people's trust and respect before he can even be given a chance. We as heroes should see the best in people, so, as class representative, I say at least act in consideration. You never know. If he gets top 3, he's automatically enrolled in one of the hero classes and could be our new classmate. The emerald-eyed teenager garnered many gleams of admiration from her classmates. Monoma and his teammates still held a constipated expression, more the copy blonde than the others. One beheld Itsuka on such a high podium because of her character that the provisional speech held much sway in their minds. It was almost as if a subconscious itch adhered to her every word because she was so sagely correct in some instances. Tokage glanced at her class rep's face molded in victory. Ah, I see. Protecting your man. How scandalous. The dark green-haired girl leaned in closely, whispering in a teasing tone. Hold on, my man? I was only doing it because I meant it, not because he see you. The orange-haired girl cut herself off abruptly. Red streaks streamed steadily upon her cheeks. He may be, okay looking, but she strictly spoke only to calm the others' wandering thoughts. Oh, Kendo-san, I can't. Belly Setsuno was loudly interrupted by Midnight announcing the start of the fight. As if saved by the sudden intrudence, Kendo leveled her head hastily to the center stage, only to witness a venomous right heel devastate the pink 1A student. The entire hero class watched shockingly as the now limp acid quirk user flew several feet before rolling to a stop, the speed, precision, and raw power tightly packed into a simple axe kick, seemingly snagged the consciousness from the 1A hero. Winner by incapacitation. Naruto Uzumaki. Monoma's smug smirk returned in full force. If Itsuka wanted him to give Uzumaki a shot, then he would. If the masked blonde beat every 1A bum like this, then he definitely would have no problem at all. Of course, he would like to do it himself way more. But this was great as well. Itsuka saw the menacing impression plastered on the copy quirk user's face too late as he jumped onto the dividing barrier between the classes again. Again? Ha, lights out for Pinky. Ha. Monoma's maniacal laughs were silenced by the enlarged fist of his class rep. Again. Itsuka was far more disappointed than she was angry. Monoma was only really antsy when 1A was in his line of sight. It was almost like dangling a banana in front of a monkey and not expecting them to go berserk. As Tsuburaba dragged the unresponsive blonde back to his seat, the green-eyed teenager gazed at the masked blonde below. Uzumaki returned his hands to his pockets, acting like his match was the most nonchalant activity. He glanced at the horned girl in front of him being carried onto a stretcher before turning his attention towards the UA section. Although not being close to the field, she could feel his half-lidded, oceanic eyes studying them all. President Mike had come over the stadium speakers, but the zeroed attentiveness of Naruto Uzumaki sent cold sparks down her spine. Then, as soon as the precarious moment began, it ended just as quickly, leaving her guessing as to how such an ominous feeling sprouted so briefly. Itsuka bit her lips seamlessly as the blonde walked past the proud-looking 18-only hero. Top 10 pro heroes. Whoa! I have to call my secretary too. Mirko fumbled her phone in her hands, ignoring the odd look she received after she pulled it seemingly out of nowhere. So now she's interested. The top 10 sweat dropped collectively. Mirko was a sucker for someone with great combat skill, almost to the point where she disregarded everything else. It was almost concerning how much the bunny hero enjoyed confrontation. However, none could blame her. Uzumaki had shown such ease in his movements that it was evident he was a skilled fighter. The impressive thing was that his showcase of refined technique was better than some heroes already, and the match had only been 10 seconds. Raw ability in tactics and hand-to-hand combat was rare for students his age, ex-villain or not. Another turn-on was the fact that he had much experience already with field work. While not technically applicable to hero experience, it was real-world articulation nonetheless. The tan bunny hero clamped her thighs after her insanely short phone call, consisting of Naruto Uzumaki in turn and nothing else. I have this internship in the bag, no problem. Mirko whispered more to herself than her comrades. So you've finally changed your ways, thank the heavens. But we have already staked our claim as well. Crust comically cried with fringed tears in his eyes. The toned woman glared, as if he wouldn't choose someone who specializes in close combat. Forget what I said before, Naruto Uzumaki will be an intern at my agency after a kick like that. Oh? Are you sure? There has only been one match for Uzumaki-kun so far, Ryukyu stated amusingly. Mirko thought it over for a second. I may not have the best eye for talent, but I know a fellow specialist when I see one. Uzumaki had no hesitation, no exaggerated movements, and no physical limitations. Why would I pass and wait for others to sink their claws before me? The tanned woman explained, getting total agreement from the top 10. I'm not sure how much of a chance you have. I mean, Hawks-san and Uzumaki-san are more related personality-wise. Shouldn't he go to an agency with a hero most fitted to himself? Gang Orca interrupted, reflecting on how Uzumaki replicated Kigo so effortlessly. I too thought that as well, not that I won't try to sway the young boy to my own any less. Best Jeanist slicked his index and thumb through his sleek hair. Takami kept one hand behind his head, boringly listening in. It seemed the others were already drawing him to be the most likely to land Uzumaki. Not that he thought any differently. The masked blonde was too good a chance to pass on to other agencies. It was slightly unfortunate that he didn't get to meet the other blonde beforehand. Mirko scoffed. As if the troublemaking diva would be a good influence, she sent the red-winged hero a smug smirk. That's cool, Kigo yawned with one eye closed. The bunny hero leapt out of her seat. You think you're better than me? Mirko sought the hood of his jacket to choke him, but being held back by the others near her prevented such. Hawk stayed put, perfectly fine with ignoring Mirko as she wrestled against the grasps of Ryukyu and Crust. His antagonistic behavior made her seethe. Such a bizarre scene from the top 10 was a rarity. The others were just thankful for their booth being so secluded from the general public. Yeah! From 1A we have Queen Versatility, Momo Yaoyorozu. The commotion picked up once more, directing the pro-hero's attention to center stage. Suga. Also from the hero course 1A, the shadowy, Fumikage Tokoemi. Present mic blared over the stadium speakers. Mirko immediately transfixed her eyesight upon the arena floor. However, the bunny hero wasn't the only female hero anticipating a great showing from the recommended UA girl from 1A. Momo Yaoyorozu had tremendous potential with her quirk, creation. Though strong feminine heroes were fairly common, the addition of more great role models for young girls needed constant conditioning. Yaoyorozu had appeal and genius intellect. Regardless of gender, she was a worthy appointed recommendation. Kigo cracked open his eyes after hearing the unruly silence from Mirko. Her attention was drawn instantly, just like a child. How funny, the red-winged hero smirked slightly. You know, Bunny-san, all that kick this and kick that talk makes me question your sanity. You'd think the media would have called you a battle junkie by now. Takami's face contorted into a smug smirk. Knowing he had pushed a button, creaking eerily, the tanned hero turned in her seat, forehead sprouting with tick marks. Damn you! She raged, trying to get out of her seat once more. Locker room tunnel. Naruto was heading back to the stands, waiting upon his next opponent. So you won, huh? A familiar voice broke through the echoing clacks of his heels. Leaning against the cool and clammy wall was his classmate, Hitoshi Shinso. Shinso's match had gone the exact way he prescribed it to be. Of course, he didn't wish for the brainwashing quirk user to lose, but it was destined so by the outcome of the pre-selections. Whether Hitoshi admitted to himself or not, simply wanting to be a hero student would never be enough. Shinso needed to not rely solely upon his quirk. Like so many others do, more than a few things went into the infrastructure of one's abilities to combat and strategize within a decree of battle. Although Shinso was fundamentally sound in the areas concerning usage of tactics, his physical attributes were still average. With a quirk like the purple-haired teenagers, he could never expect opponents to always respond audibly to his taunts, especially if his quirk's weakness was discovered. Naruto nodded, stopping to the side of Shinso. The same boring eyes glanced at the blonde's emotionless face, trying to garner any explicit emotion after such a display. The whole stadium's buzz about the ex-villain turned UA Gen Ed student has yet to cease. It is mesmerizing watching people be manipulated. After all, they all feel they have made a choice out of their own free will. Did you expect all that to happen? Hitoshi deadpanned. No, of anything I expected present mic to announce my origins. But not all might coming to my defense. It's truly unbelievable how one person's words can cause such an effect. The masked blonde gazed lazily down the tunnel from where he came. Yeah, the dull violet-eyed teenager, blandly replied. Naruto raised his head. How about your match? He asked bluntly. Shinso curled an eyebrow confusingly. Had Uzumaki not watched his match or something? Midoriya defeated me, or did you not see it? He replied. I saw it. It went as I expected. The masked blonde turned towards the slightly angered brainwashing user. Midoriya has some sort of stockpiled power quirk that was moderately applicable to breaking out of your control, the masked blonde summarized shortly. It wasn't a long drawn-out match. No, Midoriya had soundly defeated Shinso after dismantling the purple-haired boy's quirk. Not only that, but the freckled boy never used his quirk to combat Hitoshi, which meant he physically overpowered the brainwasher. I overestimated my quirk. I guess I had limitations to certain quirk users, especially those with empowerments. Hypothetically speaking, depending on his opponent's strength, Shinso could control pretty much 99% of the hero world. It just so happened, a specific type of energetically based quirks were the hardest to completely command. Although Naruto did compare the uncanny resemblance of output energy, Midoriya's activation sounds identical to All Might's. Naruto closed his eyes momentarily. Your quirk will only get stronger if you do it. Depending on your hypnosis won't save you forever. But I suppose you already knew that, the blonde concluded. Hitoshi nodded with slightly grit teeth. What are you going to do now? One of us not making it far into the finals is disappointing enough. Two would be incredibly dissatisfying. Yet, I feel you still have something planned, the brainwashing quirk user theorized. I do, I still have to showcase my worth after all. A win against a physically and mentally weaker opponent proves nothing, Naruto stoically said under his black mask. The purple-haired teenager grumbled in his head. A 1A student making it into the finals. Weak? What does that make everyone else to him? Naruto focused his fluorescent blue eyes on his classmate. I expected you to be more upset. All things considering, did you have a change of heart? The masked blonde feigned curiosity, although he knew the reason for his absent brooding. Earlier on, Naruto had seen Shinso return to the stands. Finding Class 1C encouraging his efforts, the pride was evident on their faces, most if not all of them expecting neither him nor Shinso to make it as far as they did. The blonde supposed Hitoshi thought losing brought shame upon himself and his dreams, and being the leader of their class, he felt he had failed them. Expectantly, the introspective period he had after his match faded slightly because of said encouragement. Just like everyone else, Hitoshi had dreams too, and hearing people actually praise his quirk was disorienting for him. Unintentionally, the brainwashing quirk user motivated his classmates to strive for their own goals. All they needed was for one person to show them that repeated mediocrity can improve if they tried and believed hard enough. Sort of. People just gave me some things to think about. Shinso pointed his chin to the ceiling. It was obvious to the blonde that he wanted to figure out his problems on his own. The blue-eyed Uzumaki lazily nodded, hands still confined to his UA gym uniform pockets. I have to go prepare for my next match. Hopefully I can influence 1C to do their best as well. Naruto slowly strode off, leaving the purple-haired boy behind once more. Good luck, Uzumaki. Not that you need it anyway, Shinso scoffed playfully. The masked blonde stuck his left hand out to the side L, acknowledging the Gen Ed student with an uncharacteristic thumbs up. The brainwashing quirk user stayed stagnant, and collected his thoughts as the footsteps grew more distant. Knowing Uzumaki for only so long, Hitoshi could somewhat reconcile on what strategic path the blonde would make. So far, Naruto seemed to favor the strategic high ground above all else. Luring others into a false sense of complacency came easy to the masked blonde, surprisingly. The ease with which others fell for his strategic mind was disturbing. Shinso wouldn't have flinched if someone told him Uzumaki had planned such an outcome from the very beginning. Every move was excellingly attributed to a best-case scenario for the blonde. Hitoshi wished there was a way to witness the blonde take an IQ test, just to settle his own strategic mind. It sounds cliché, but Naruto Uzumaki's mind was probably his most dangerous weapon, bar none. Unfamiliar footsteps snapped the purple-haired teenager from his trance. Approaching from his left was the black-haired girl from 1A, obviously en route to her own match. Seeing how the next fight was soon to begin, Shinso made his way to the 1C section, considering he lost his match already. UA section. Naruto approached Class 1B as he had done before. No one had turned to discover who was returning to their section for reasons entirely obvious to himself. The announcement of his mysterious past, although extremely devoid of personal details, may have completely changed the way these hero courses thought about him. He had already rid most of them of their own chances to validate their placement in the most prestigious position of UA. Sometimes even he forgets the path to one's own goals may tramp over many who seek the same. It was too bad nonetheless. The blonde's goal was too inquisitive compared to lowly dreams of fame and fortune. Ah, Uzumaki-san, congratulations on passing the first round. An orange head swiveled in their seat to face the lazy blonde as he seated himself. Oh, thank you, Kendo-san. It was not too difficult, many eavesdropping. Sweat dropped hearing his dismissal. Itsuka smiled, although the grin seemed shaky. All Might must think highly of you after the big fist user nervously avoided his previous status. Naruto lowered his head onto his enclosed fist boringly. It was unexpected. Nothing I couldn't have handled on my own though, truthfully. The masked blonde had been ostracized for his past before. It was nothing new. Before Itsuka could question his deflection, a certain green-haired girl interrupted her. An ex-villain, huh? I would have peed myself if I had an entire stadium screaming at me like that. You sure are full of surprises, Uzumaki-kun. Your quirk is pretty strong too. Hopefully you keep winning so you can be in our class. Tokage slithered her tongue over her lips, leading to a sickly sweet glance from Itsuka. Haha. That was the most satisfying match I've ever seen. The way Pink Girl went flying was hilaroof. The sudden intrudence from Minoma was expectantly shut down by an enlarged fist. As Itsuka was distracted by the copy blonde, questions rained in from all of 1B. Faces from all angles encircled the uncomfortable blonde. Are you going to be in 1B now? Did you fight All Might? Is Midnight Sensei your mom? Were you some criminal mastermind? Did you target us on purpose? What's your quirk? Are you stronger than 1A? Naruto glanced strangely at the students from 1B, suddenly acknowledging his presence. He wasn't used to such attention. It was, honestly, very uncomfortable. He may read people well, but in a socially progressing talk, he may as well be the most inept. Plus the question about Midnight being his mother left him staring strangely at Tsuburaba. Yeah! From 1A we have Queen Versatility, Momo Yaoyorozu. As if saved by the bell, everyone immediately backed off. They were confusingly attentive to all things 1A. It was kind of comical. Suga. Also from the hero course 1A, the shadowy, Fumikage Tokoemi. Present Mike may have been a little loud for his taste, but at least he inadvertently saved him from answering a rapidly bizarre interrogation. Canon fight. Naruto frowned under his mask. Momo Yaoyorozu had exactly performed how he expected her to. The voluptuous girl overthunk her battles and was afraid to make mistakes, which led to her being rather ineffective on the field. A quirk like hers was so diverse she had almost no limits when it came to inorganic devices. Such an ability was a waste on someone who spent too much time in their own head than enacting in the line of duty. Not that he didn't believe she couldn't improve on such a weakness. Her weakness, if composed correctly, could be one of her greatest weapons, but that step was easier said than done. The girl needed experience, which a UA student had little of. Hopefully, she would still land an internship to improve her less than functional battle qualifications. With that being said, Tokoemi had an impressive quirk as well. A sentient quirk was extremely rare, and one as powerful as his was almost never seen. He preyed upon Yaoyorozu's over-analysis expertly, and displayed impressive ability in the cavalry battle as well. Him as an opponent would be troubling for anyone else, but for Naruto, a plan had already been divided in dealing with the quirk best fitted for the shadows. From Class 1B, the intense Tetsu 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 Tetsu. The steel user roared with his arms raised over his head. And from Class 1A, the manly Ejiro Kirishima. The sensation of déjà vu enacted immediately as the red-haired boy did the exact same. Cannon fight. Come on Tetsu Tetsu. Get up. The Class 1B students shouted at their gray-haired classmate after the double knockout display. Disappointingly neither stood. Either way, it didn't matter. Knowing a result like this led to a brief challenge constructed by the proctor. He still has a chance, everyone. Calm down. Itsuka tried her best to diffuse the ruckus currently undertaking some of the more competitive 1B students. In the end, Midnight relayed to the stadium about the arm wrestling match to occur when both had recovered. Though the widely entertaining fight composed of straight endurance comparable by two extremely similar quirks ended abruptly, the next match hadn't rid any excitement. Katsuki Bakugo, UA's first-year representative, would battle for the finale of the round of 16. Many had bet on the exploding blonde to win the entire tournament, so it was not surprising to witness news outlets shuffling for the best angles. Yeah! He's explosively determined, and somewhat of a hothead. From Class 1A, the number 1 ranked in the UA exams, Katsuki Bakugo. Thunderous applause surmounted most introductions, except Shuto Todoroki. And now, from 1A as well, the gravitationally sound Ochako Uraraka. Naruto could almost feel the looms of pity thrown the girl's way. She didn't have the combat ability of the ashy blonde, but she still looked composed nevertheless. The masked blonde garnered a small tinge of respect for the brown-haired girl as a result. Cannon fight. Seeing the bubbly 1A girl almost defeat Bakugo was excitable for the entire crowd. The fact that the blonde had brutally beat her down for the entire fight had enraged the crowd, so seeing her give him a challenge was satisfying. However, Bakugo was too much of a force for her to overcome, resulting in her losing consciousness in the final stretches of the match. She fought well, but her ability to combat frontal challenges was inferior to the ashy blonde. Her quirk was definitely one that had much potential, so her limitations were only reduced by her imagination. Bakugo, like any other, had limits. Although that was true, his limits were exceeding those of his classmates, evidently showing he was no stranger to training his quirk. Another thing people may have missed was the fact that Bakugo was excellently composed. Although he looked enraged and intelligent in battle, he never wasted movements and used his physical attributes in conjunction with his quirk, resulting in impressive maneuvers and increasingly difficult strides to combat. Like Todoroki, the ashy blonde already had the arsenal to become a sidekick, and it would still be a definitively close match with both. Kirishima and Tetsu had recovered tremendously fast, leading to an inevitable matchup once more. Although the challengers were relatively close in quirk strength, the endurance of Kirishima reigned king. 1B had visibly quieted at the time of defeat, leaving Monoma to scrounge around in his seat. Figuratively, the battle between the two was a metaphor to how close the classes were in strength, and if Tetsu were to win, their class would be seen as stronger for once. Unfortunately, the steel quirk user lost, which put Shiozaki in a tough position. The green-haired girl was going to be pressured into performing well under the circumstance that she solely represented them now. Second round. After an interval in which competitors stuck to strategically planning and fixing their wounds, the quarterfinals was set to begin. Welcome back. The contenders are lined up and ready to dance. Yeah! President Mike hopped around in the booth, much to the annoyance of his companion. Match 9. Izuku Midoriya vs. Shoto Todoroki. Match 10. Ibara Shiozaki vs. Tenya Ida. Match 11. Naruto Uzumaki vs. Fumikage Tokoemi. Match 12. Ijirio Kirishima vs. Katsuki Bakugo. Expectantly, with the lesser amount of students left, the time within the matches decreased. Therefore, the fights were going to happen quickly, one right after another. Local news networks and internet live streams maxed out in viewer attendance, leaving the first years to be the most viewed UA Sports Festival age group over their upperclassmen. Mario Togato was dominating the third-year bracket as always, leaving the attendance to drop to view more balanced age groups. Expectedly, the first years received the most popularity due to the fact 1A had fought villains in their first semester of school, and won. Many believe these kids to be the next best generation of heroes, led by Bakugo and Todoroki, with up and rising stars upon the rest of 1A. At least those headlines were the beginning audience-engaging segments. Now they had an unsuspecting ex-villain registered in the first-year Gen Ed class. Breaking news infiltrated social media, sending many fans flocking to get a glimpse of this Gen Ed student who was causing an uproar in the hero community. 250,000 live-in-attendance fans littered the seating, 15,000 heroes looking for interns and potential future sidekicks. This included 6 of the top 10 heroes, and 24 million online or TV watchers, ranging from all across Japan. A sixth of the land of the rising sun was witnessing the upcoming hero students from UA battle out their final rounds. All of this for first years, who hadn't even finished their first semester. It was a truly record-breaking viewership that surmounted most sports events across the globe. Alright. What's going on? Let's get the quarterfinals, sponsored by Cola Coke, underway. The voice quirk user hyped the overflowing UA stadium. The half-and-half user, Shoto Todoroki, stood expressionlessly across from his opponent. White and red hair split down the middle, swayed in the light breeze while his mismatched colored eyes never left the boy across center stage. He's shown us his potential from a quick first-round win. From 1A, the other, Shoto Todoroki, Endeavor stood a few rows up, excreting his fire tauntingly at his son. Izuku stood defiantly against one if not his strongest classmate. Putting up a fight against Todoroki would not only prove to All Might, but himself as well, that he could fight even while hurting himself. If he could beat a strong opponent, then there was so much potential to get stronger. His victory was a close one, but his willpower held strong. From 1A, the freckled menace, Izuku Midoriya. All Might sat in his skeletal form, gripping his kneecaps in nervousness. Todoroki was going to be an extremely tough opponent, and his protege was not yet strong enough to contain One for All. But he had faith nonetheless. Fighters ready? Go! Midnight cracked her whip resoundingly, watching as Todoroki launched a straight-lined ice attack towards the ninth successor. Cannon fight. Midoriya let him win by activating his fire. How stupidly foolish. Also, by injuring himself extensively during the match, he distractedly showed that he was unfit for hero work by disregarding his limits. Naruto sat lazily, observing as Semitas and Midnight ended the fight. Todoroki was the only one left standing after the impressive blast shook the confines of the stadium. Midoriya had heart, no one could disagree with that. But he was a slave to his morals and All Might, as shown letting his opponents win so he could feel better about himself in return. It was a sickening reversal of how Naruto would have handled the half and half user. Suga, they were both so strong, I think I would lose to both of them. So amazing, Itsuka said with her jaw dropped, some of 1B nodding as well. The fight was pretty spectacular from a fan standpoint, but from a hero's perspective, both fighters still had many things to improve on. For one, Todoroki was too simple in attack, relying on brute force over skill, and Midoriya, the more he used his quirk, the more severe his injuries were, leaving him vulnerable for multiple staged hero missions. Although, the way Endeavor was salivating on the sidelines over his greatest masterpiece finally utilizing his own power, many probably thought Todoroki was more powerful than he was, and they were right in a way. But when the time comes for him to go against someone who has equal or had more brute strength than his own, he'd lose drastically. Shaken from his analysis, Kendo turned around concerningly. You've been quiet, Uzumaki-san. Are you nervous? The big fist user stared at him. As expected from the class rep, stoic oceanic eyes gaze at her. Nervous? No, my opponent is not as strong as Todoroki, the masked blonde boringly drew out, voice devoid of emotion. What about Midoriya-san? He put on an impressive display, don't you think? The emerald-eyed girl embarrassingly replied after reading the blonde's impassiveness wrong. The wavy blonde Uzumaki shook his head, maybe impressive to the fans, but not the heroes. He basically incapacitated himself. That's not very promising when the draft for interns comes along. The comment led to Itsuka and some of the surrounding students to silently observe the heroes frowning towards the 1A student. Oh, I guess I overlooked that. But isn't Tokoemi-san a strong opponent as well? I mean, he has a quirk that's powerful and super rare, the slender girl asked curiously. Naruto nodded. Yes, he is. I think I'll be okay. I know how his quirk operates. Indeed he did. During the cavalry battle, it was rather easy to overhear Tokoemi explaining how much control he had over his quirk. Yes, I love when the side character overpowers the protagonists. He said the same thing about Pinky. Monoma smugly intervened. Side character? The others around him sweat dropped. What was he talking about? At the sight of Tenya Ida entering from the 1A tunnel after Cementos reimbursed the Foundation, the crowd loudened. Naruto and 1B looked to the center stage in anticipation of Match 10, and the last of 1B's competitors. Ida lined up, trying to stand proudly after being belittled in his previous match to someone who could have easily beat him with just gadgets. Although a win, it was a massive hit to his pride. Being humiliated on live TV in front of his family, he was determined to reinstate his family's name with honor after such a showing. His first match was, let's skip that. From 1A, the swift Tenya Ida, Present Mike exclaimed, getting many to laugh at his insinuation, much to the boys' embarrassment. 1B hooped and hollered loudly as their peaceful classmate, Shiozaki, entered from the right. Although her face was dead set, tension arose in her shoulders from all of the weight of her classmates' wishes for continuous victory. Her first match was a blowout against an electric opponent. From 1B, the peaceful and loving Ibara Shiozaki. The mohawked hero read expertly from a cheat sheet, making sure he didn't call her assassin again. Fighters ready, go! Ida sped off at the repetitive crack whip, weaving in between the vines approaching his form. Cannon fight. The solemn silence of the UA's 1B section was deafening. Ida from 1A defeated Shiozaki so handily that the match was over in just a little after Naruto's own time. He literally gripped her shoulders and ran her out of the circle. no violence, no exaggerated movements, just plainly pushed her out of the circle without a fight. The problem with Shiozaki was that she was too dependent on her quirk and its abilities. Sure, her quirk was very strong, but she lacked physical prowess, in which she stayed stagnant during a fight. Therefore, her assimilated movements could only withstand certain speed ranges until they were completely overrun. Ida, well, there wasn't much to judge on. He won fair and held back when he could have used an attack, leaving good impressions on those interested in his character. Naruto's fight had come up rather quickly, faster than he expected. If the crow-headed boy responded how he wanted him to, Naruto would have another quick fight in his hands. As the others half-wittingly wished him good luck, the masked blonde readied himself for his match, his face effortlessly contorted into his usual stoicism, but underlying seriousness and determination displayed through his mesmerizing orbs. Down in the arena, Namuri idly stood waiting for the masked blonde to come strolling in. Although she was nervous, she had utmost faith in Naruto to win, but she still couldn't help but worry. Tokoyami was one of the stronger students in 1A, and his quirk was probably one of the best as well. Fumikage could be an offensive and a defensive force simultaneously, thus leaving others to struggle against him. It was seen in the cavalry battle on how dominating a force he could be. He had defended his team numerous times from the others directly targeting their headband. However, even with his great defensive ability in Dark Shadow, the force in Team Todoroki was too much. Tokoyami had a weakness. She just hoped Naruto could discover and exploit it, if he hadn't already. Booming hollers disrupted her stupor as people stood from their seats to get a glimpse at the newcomer. Looking in the opposite direction from where the crow-headed challenger entered, Kayama saw the lazy blonde entering like she thought he would. Last round's interference from All Might brought upon an entire fandom willing to believe Uzumaki had what it took to be a hero. He had quickly become one of the new fan favorites. Seeing how he was a Gen Ed student and had been recommended for UA, some were still unnerved by UA's decision to allow an ex-villain such an honor, but the disrespectful comments were kept to a minimum. Oh yeah! Match 11 is coming to you live. From 1A, he defeated a recommended student within 20 seconds. The darkness incarnate, Fumikage Tokoyami, said student barely lifted a finger at his announcement, leaving present Mike to sob comically. The blonde stood opposite of the crow-faced competitor. Here's who Japan has been waiting for. From Gen Ed, the masked underdog or UA's villain hero, Naruto Uzumaki. His announcement was a conundrum for fans. They were still conflicted on whether to cheer for the blonde or not, knowing he was once a villain. But just like his given title, Uzumaki was a complete oxymoron. Midnight readied her whip, glancing to Cementos, silently confirming his attentiveness as well. Fighters ready? Go! Namuri's voice reached every corner of the stadium. Dark Shadow. Fumicage's sentient quirk extended from his body within high. Dark Shadow raced towards the blonde who dodged each claw outreach for person. Wild swipes and charges barraged the blonde as he weaved expertly. Even with Dark Shadow's unconventional targeting, the blonde moved impeccably smooth, gliding the sentient quirk along. Though unnoticeable to Tokoyami, many heroes had picked up on the openings Uzumaki was making. However unguarded he may seem to the shadowed figure, the masked blonde was trying to get Dark Shadow to overextend. The golden blonde was deviating from his position so that he was never directly in line with his opponent's quirk. Unfortunately, from the beginning of the fight and with the sun at his back, his shadow was extended towards Tokoyami, giving the shadow quirk user more advanced maneuverability. From his previous fights, Naruto had discovered Tokoyami's quirk's strength depended on how much darkness Dark Shadow could feed off of. Therefore, with more inclusion of dark, the sentient quirk grew more powerful with its display. Uzumaki had calculated his approach and how he was going to deal with the troublesome ability beforehand, uncovering another trepidation of his quirk. Dark Shadow would become fodder for his true target. Like Shiozaki, Tokoyami never left a certain position, finding it too difficult to fight in tandem with his quirk while completing complicated movements. Nonetheless, targeting the host's body would shut down the crow-faced competitor. The retraction of Dark Shadow was quick enough to react when Naruto would inevitably get close, so that would be the most troubling problem. But, like he had presumed before, a certain ability of his would effectively render such an ability useless. Naruto hit across Dark Shadow's face, making the quirk stumble a couple feet back. The protruding shadow reached out to wrap its arms around him. As it closed in, the masked blonde disappeared. Ameno Tajikura. Naruto replaced himself using his Amenotejikura. This allowed him to shift himself between spaces, causing anything currently occupying the space he targets to swap places with him. Whether it's to avoid an attack or replace himself when backed into a corner, this ability was extremely dependable. Tokoyami watched as Dark Shadow enclosed his arms around the masked blonde. He was a bit perturbed as to why the blonde stopped moving. For the first few seconds, Uzumaki was dodging Dark Shadow easily. So what was he up to? His quirk attracted things to him, so why wasn't he using it? Suddenly, the world in front of him went dark. His body felt as if something constricted his entire midsection to a cylinder, and shot him at the speed of light. The disorientation enacted right away, making his head swoon and his body struggle to keep the bowel from reaching his throat. Naruto shifted to Tokoyami's position, replacing the crow-faced teenager to the fate of his own quirk being used against him. Dark Shadow's golden gleaming orbs widened upon seeing Fumikage in front of him. A millisecond, not even followed by his own superior eyes. Something had happened to his partner, now dazed and having trouble standing on wobbling knees. With the momentum of the sentient quirk not being able to switch on an immediate notice, Tokoyami was lifted off his feet into the air and sent into a tumble, getting closer to the line. Fumikage was unable to stop as his vision began to clear. The white light seemed to taunt his inability to stop himself as his upper body shot over the white line, and then he stopped in midair, the feeling of familiar arms wrapped underside his arms. Tokoyami's quirk saves him from falling, but it's struggling to keep him upright. The voice quirk user sounded over the stadium speakers. I can't hold you much longer, Tokoyami-kun. Think of something. His quirk's shadowy face, visibly strained under his own body weight. The masked blonde watched amusingly as the sentient shadow continuously fought to stay upright with his partner. It seemed as if they were too focused on not falling. You forgot about me, Tokoyami-san. Naruto stood with his hand outstretched at Dark Shadow. Both constituents' eyes widened at the voice stoically announcing itself from behind them. Now Dark Shadow. Immediately, Tokoyami was launched backwards in a suplexing motion. He landed on his feet, albeit clumsily. The sentient crow fell forwards, but remained floating as his partner redirected his movement with fine-tuned control. The crowd roared in approval as Fumikage made an impressive move to stop himself from falling. However, even with his efforts, the boy was barely a foot from being out. Whoa! Tokoyami keeps him and Dark Shadow standing. Their coordination is top-notch. President Mike yelled out. Naruto nearly smiled at how easily they played into his hands. With such an impressive move, the crowd just expected Tokoyami to turn it around. Dark Shadow and Fumikage worked so well together, and knowing this, the blonde made a decisive move, figuring the sentient quirk would save him. But none of it mattered because Tokoyami was still on the borderline, hand-delivered and slightly dazed from a Amenotejikura. It gave enough time to build up the counterpart to Bansho Tenin. Shinra Tensei, the same audible effect as Bansho Tenin, rang distinctively through the stadium sections. The pang of anti-gravity sent chilling shrivels up the closer rows of fans and heroes. In this move, Naruto inverted the effects of Bansho Tenin, in which Shinra Tensei sent an object or person to a coordinate of his choosing like an invisible wall of gravitational force. Like Bansho Tenin, this move could go 50 miles per hour compared to his reverse effects 40. If he could describe the effect of being hit by such an ability, it would be a translucent force slamming into your body and dragging you as you gasp for breath. Even a small foot would be enough. Naruto's stoic, half-lidded eyes anchored in satisfaction for a second, watching Tokoyami's confusion as to why his body wasn't moving towards the blonde. The crow-faced teenager readied himself for the masked blonde's quirk to pull him off his feet. Seeing the minuscule amounts of dust being swept in his direction, the 1A hero student braced himself. Meanwhile, Dark Shadow placed himself between his partner and Uzumaki. As they had strategized, Dark Shadow would adjust himself to the ability, while protecting Fumikage from the disorientation. However, Tokoyami was met with a gut-wrenching hit, sending him and Dark Shadow reeling back, unable to control their movements. Blood leaked from the crow-faced teenager as his back thrusted into the ground below the center stage. Dark Shadow, unable to control itself, slowly receded into Tokoyami's body. Fumikage was riddled with cuts and scrapes from the impact, leaving an indent of his body. The pain was too much for the boy as he lay trying to breathe, but the air had been knocked cleanly from his lungs. Just like his classmate, Tokoyami had been claimed by darkness, driven into the confines of unconsciousness. Semitas ran from his chair to the downed boy, placing a hand onto the boy's chest. The Yui uniform chest weakly rose and fell, but nothing that was life-threatening or mildly concerning. The cement-controlling hero nodded to his coworker and motioned for a medical team. Winner! Naruto Uzumaki by incapacitation. Midnight voiced through the microphone, sending the crowd into a frenzy. In 23 seconds, Naruto had defeated his second opponent by a landslide, signifying more display of his quirk. In the UA section, no way, he beat Tokoyami-san, Siro said, sitting with his eyes and mouth agate. Fumikage was the strongest in 1A when it came to practicality, but being defeated so soundly was craziness. Was their classmate off his game, or was Uzumaki just that strong? Ochako, who had recovered from her fight with Bakugo, grit her teeth. Tokoyami-kun got completely blindsided by his quirk. I wish Deku-kun could explain it. The usually bubbly girl shed some light tears at seeing medics pick up their motionless comrade. Kaminari and Kyoka had come back from visiting Nina at Recovery Girl's medical room. Of course, their friend was fine, but she was going to have a little soreness in her head from receiving such a strong kick. Tokoyami-san too, what the hell is going on? That quirk is just too strong. The electrification quirk user gripped his hair and swung his blonde locks side to side, so he can attract, repel, and switch places with people, all involving some sort of gravitational force, or the alteration of matter at the atomic level. Maybe it's something like Uraraka-san, where instead of zero gravity, he uses anti-gravity. Or it could be molecule manipulation as well. Momo sat behind the group with her legs crossed, being defeated so simply by Tokoyami. To then have him be beaten so severely by someone else, beat her confidence down significantly. Still, his quirk was strong, very strong, yet, she felt like he was still hiding abilities from them all. Uzumaki had already taught them the lesson about underestimation and to not take things at face value. Of course, he could have been pulling out all the stops in order to ensure he makes it into the later rounds. But the scenario felt the same as the first rounds. The masked blonde kept luring them into false acceptance of him and his abilities, only to find he had more to provide. It was like his brain operated at 2 to 3 steps faster than everyone else. How could you compete against someone who could plan for your decision before you even made it? Can't he hold back a little? I mean, he can easily push them out of the ring, so what's the point of injuring his opponents? Jiro twisted her finger around her earlobe nervously, hoping for some explanation. Look at him. He's like a machine. There's no holding back that. He destroys and moves on, leaving no openings to chance. I wouldn't want to go against that monster. Minata's face morphed into a pale blue, thinking about Naruto slamming an invisible force between his legs. Although Mineta exaggerated a tad, his classmates around him silently nodded their agreement. Naruto Uzumaki was now a dangerous opponent because all of them disregarded his strength early on. They painted a red carpet to the finals, and now that he has nothing to consider besides one-on-one combat, their classmates were falling like flies. They idly wondered how Todoroki and Bakugo would deal with Uzumaki. Bird Boy down for the count. Haha, what's with the frowny faces, haha. Like before, Monoma from 1B hopped their divider in order to taunt them, and then, Itsuka sighed heavily, having forgotten Nito once more. A quick karate chop to the back of his neck and he was out like a light. Seriously, did he also have head injury regeneration for a quirk too? 1B's class rep peeled the copy blonde off the wall, dragging him by his collar with swirls in his eyes. Top 10 heroes. Geez, another one? This kid isn't meant to be fighting first years, Mirko said, watching blood pool around Tokoyami's mouth, while Uzumaki slouched by the UA proctor. Best Jeanist swiped his forefront fingers across his blonde hair. I'd have to agree. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think his opponents have landed a hit on him yet. The man elegantly crossed his lengthy, jean-covered legs. Collectively, either Ishido nor Tokoyami had lasted more than 25 seconds on center stage. Nevertheless, there had been a few blowouts so far, including Todoroki vs. Siro, Kaminari vs. Shiozaki, and Ida vs. Shiozaki. However, all of those matches lasted 20 seconds or more, and whilst close to Uzumaki's, none had incapacitated their fellow students as he had. Most villains have a habit of drawing out their matches. Although his status would suggest he'd do the same, He's efficient like All Might. Unfortunately, the HPSC would love a future enforcer like this. Ruthless and fast-working, just like Lady Nagath. Kigo voiced his opinion, whispering towards the end, reminiscing about the former hero. He was eerily similar to the dark blue and pink-haired woman, who acted similarly. Lady Nagath was serious and disciplined. In the past, she had an optimistic outlook in her desire to be a great hero. However, her ruthless and secret work for the Public Safety Commission left her jaded and disillusioned, being forced to kill people to preserve a false sense of security. She developed a cynical outlook on life and grew to detest the hypocrisy and fragility of Heroes Society. Lady Nagath and Naruto Uzumaki were nearly the same in that regard, though underneath lay a deeper connection none were familiarized with. Bringing up that name, Hawks had mistakenly reminded himself of the job given to him, one that he was hesitant to seek out, knowing what she was capable of if she was ever to cross paths with him again. Gang Orca nodded vehemently at Hawks' reasoning. The difference between the UA students and Uzumaki-san is the fact that he has already witnessed the Hero Society from an alternate point of view. Many of our upcoming students see heroes as the highest pinnacle of society. Fame, fortune, those are the characteristics of celebrities, not heroes. From what All Might described Uzumaki as, it wouldn't be far-fetched if he shared a more neutral view of society as a whole, an imperfect middle ground. The killer whale mutant quirk user added his own nagging thoughts. I agree, all the more reason to encourage one such as Uzumaki to fight for his own ideals under the law. He is a symbol already gaining recognition and support as we sit here. But he is still a child nevertheless. Ryukyu had her legs crossed femininely, patiently awaiting others' opinions. Still a child. Kigo observed the stoic boy drifting towards his locker room. That was no child. One such as Naruto Uzumaki never truly had a taste of childhood. He's been on his own from day one. No child would survive without having mental capacity well beyond their years. The golden blonde head disappeared into the darkness of the tunnel, never straying or acknowledging the fans screaming his name. A few minutes later, after Cementos and the medics cleared the area of debris and minuscule amounts of blood, Bakugo and Kirishima were finally due to fight. The stadium funneled the electricity of the fans through the speakers, shaking the foundation of the UA Coliseum at its hinges. He won the first round in a drawn-out arm wrestling contest. From Class 1A, we have the extremely manly Ejiro Kirishima. The redhead's war cry echoed throughout the arena, banging his hardened arms together in excitement. Across from his classmate stood the rage-filled Bakugo, ready to prove his dominance to Red Hair and then to Masked Boy shortly after. He won in an impressively destructive display. From Class 1A, King Explosion, Katsuki Bakugo. Loud whoops and raised fists waved through the arena for the highly destructive, but entertaining boy. Fighter ready? Go! Kirishima charged head-on, aiming for a short battle, knowing he'd lose in a test of attrition. Die! The ashy blonde pointed his right palm in an uppercutting motion, aiming for the redhead's hardened forearm. Cannon fight. Kirishima is down. Bakugo moves on. President Mike exclaimed through his booth's microphone. The decibel level in the stadium started to rupture. Sensitive hearing quirk people. The entire fanbase wanted to witness another highly entertaining fight like Todoroki vs. Midoriya, and Uraraka vs. Bakugo. Down to our final 4 competitors. Give it up for the last remaining participants. The voice quirk user riled up the already impossibly loud attendees. Match 13, Shoto Todoroki vs. Tenya Ida. Match 14, Naruto Uzumaki vs. Katsuki Bakugo. Match 15, W13 vs. W14. Who will take home the crown? Let's have our finalists line up. President Mike motioned Midnight to line up the boys in front of the eager crowd, waiting to encompass the tension between the remaining students. 3 entered from the 1A locker room, while the odd man out entered from the 1C locker room. All 4 were escorted to their respective positions, leaving the respective cameras and journalists to position themselves in the front rows. The second-rated competitor, winning both matches with high levels of unforeseen force. From 1A, the blistering frost, Shoto Todoroki. The half-and-half user stepped forward, reluctantly raising his right hand. The 5th-rated competitor, winning both matches with unmatched speed and agility. From 1A, the turbo obstructor, Tenya Ida, said blue-haired boy stepped forward militaristically, bowing at the waist. The first-ranked competitor, winning both matches with impressive battle IQ and power. from 1A, the first-year representative, Katsuki Bakugo. Stepping forward, it was surprising to see such venom directed at his newest opponent who ignored him effortlessly. And lastly, he was ranked 60th coming into the sports festival, sneaking by the competition and winning both finals matches with brutal efficiency. From Gen Ed 1C, the underdog and UA's villain hero, Naruto Uzumaki. The masked blonde stepped forward, nodding his head lazily before retreating back to spot. The ashy blonde next to him glared at the back of his head all the way. The vast majority of Japan watched from their couches, train stations, TV store windows, and any device they could get their hands on. The first-year event was becoming one of the widest streamed events of the UA Sports Festival, surpassing the Golden Class led by All Might in his UA days. For all they know, these boys could be the face of Japan in 5 to 10 years, replacing the old and in with the new. Of course, in those years, Hawks and Mirko would be leading the generations. Tartarus Prison. Damn 60th? Could have fooled me. That Uzumaki boy is something else. He's really spicing up the sport festival with how he's defeating his opponents. They aren't censoring his knockouts either, a random inmate commented, getting the others to throw collectibles around, betting on the winner. A woman sitting not too far from the conversation heard the name being called over the TV speakers. Her dark eyes shook in shock, hearing a name she hadn't heard in what felt like forever. Turning around from where she was seated in her jumpsuit, her face only grew paler seeing a blonde-haired teenager with unforgettable oceanic eyes. Although his face was masked, she could tell he was still as handsome as she remembered him. Tears formed in the corners of her eyes, forcing her to drop her head to avoid a scene. Her orange sleeve was brought up to wipe her eyes, leaving slight red marks. For the first time in a long time, her world grew a little lighter at seeing that face again, even if it was through a TV screen. The woman clenched her fists to her pant legs with venomous determination. One of these days, I will see you again, Mai. The figure stared with a heavy heart, hoping to see that beautiful face in person, but for now, just seeing him through a small TV screen would satisfy, barely. With the coming of the final rounds, UA's top first years were on full display. As viewers from all across Japan continued to tune in, the finalists readied themselves for their fights. The sports festival was mostly overlooked for being a generally competitive event with few conflicts. Many looked forward to the friendly atmosphere, while others sought entertainment in the battle rounds. Heroes and fans alike strove to connect with Japan's future protectors, making sure the future was in good hands. As new generations came and influenced society, most if not all of UA's alumni contributed widely in the field. Ever since the founding of the institution, none had the widely successful output of high-ranking heroes as much as UA. Currently, 3 of the 4 finalists already showcased abilities on par with the highest tiers of sidekicks. Such promise from first-year students was not unseen. But the fact that UA was grooming top 10 successors so early was unheard of, not that the media or witnesses could argue. Shoto Todoroki, the half-hot and half-cold quirk user, was amongst the most powerful in Japan for his age. His brute force was overwhelming, even for some low-ranking heroes. Such power combined with the best of both his parents' quirks, was only destined to become stronger, of course, as he continued his career and sharpened his battle tactics. Todoroki had the potential to be the number 1 hero. Katsuki Bakugo, the explosion quirk user, was also amongst the strongest of the new generation. Arguably, the ashy blonde already had an excellent repertoire of skills ranging from strength to endurance. This hidden skill set was comparable to low-ranking heroes, but as his time at UA continued, Bakugo would only continue to improve. However, such a skilled student was often underestimated because of his superior persona that kept many distant. His potential was only stunted by his emotions, in which many felt would decay the promising UA hero student if handled incorrectly. The last candidate for the highest in-turn draft count was, surprisingly, Naruto Uzumaki. Coming into the sports festival, the masked blonde was an unknown, just another face in the crowd. The teleportation quirk user came seemingly out of nowhere to include himself in the strongest student talks. With his stunningly perfect victories in the finals, many were left at and shined by his capabilities. Compared to Bakugo and Todoroki, the masked blonde showed few abilities. However, these abilities were extremely polished, leaving many heroes to question what else he had in store. His attentiveness and intellect left many questioning as to why he wasn't known before. And so, with the announcement of his ex-villain status, many were left seeking more answers to his sudden appearance. Conclusively, the overall emotionless, but lazily demeanored young man would have the watchful gaze of heroes seeking a wonderfully sculpted student to cultivate even further. Waiting room 1C. Naruto sat quietly at one of the few lonely tables that littered the rather bare room. When Shinso and him had miraculously passed the qualifying rounds, management hastily set them up with what looked like a smaller locker room, bottles of water, small electrolyte-infused capsules, and sports drinks lay to his right, soaking rings into the foldable plastic tables. The masked blonde slouched in seat, silently contemplating the way he wanted to beat Katsuki Bakugo. Someone like the ashy blonde thought themselves to be better than those around him. However, defeat in itself for the exploding boy would be enough. As he had depicted even before the sport festival, Bakugo hated being anything but first. But things were going to be different for this match. Whether those around the ashy blonde admitted it or not, Bakugo was deceivingly cunning and capitalized on mistakes ruthlessly. For the strategy Naruto was implementing, he would have to get the exploding blonde riled up. Attacking head-on was a known factor of the raging 1A student when met with something unsatisfactory to his standards. Such emotional distress was evident in the obstacle course and the cavalry battle where he completely disregarded his surroundings in order to pursue Todoroki and Midoriya, and then Team Monoma in the second round. Nevertheless, a 100% foolproof plan was never truly 100%, considering Bakugo seemed to think best on his feet and fought well even with a fluctuating temperament. Thinking 2 or 3 steps ahead never hurt. Let them hear you. From Class 1A, the half and half gladiator, Shoto Todoroki, President Mike echoed. Naruto could feel the vibrations of cheers throughout his locker room, notifying him of the first semifinal match. He's fast and he's furious. From Class 1A, the Ida Dynasty turbocharger, Tenya Ida. Thunderous applause shook the locker room foundation. For the first fight, Naruto was expecting a decent squabble. Todoroki lacked the speed and agility of Ida, which gave favor to the blue-haired student, but Ida lacked ranged attacks, therefore giving advantage to Todoroki. It could go either way, but Todoroki was more cunning than people gave him credit for. Ida was destined to make a mistake thinking his turbo was unchallenged because of its speed, so he would expect Todoroki in the finals, but a tad beaten down from an altercation with Ida. Fighters ready? Go! Although Naruto was inside and away from said battle, he could envision Kayama-sensei cracking her whip quite clearly. Just thinking about the woman made him sigh. Troublesome woman. He lazily shook his head as a sense of déjà vu washed over him. Young Naruto. Suddenly, Naruto's eyes widened a fraction at the unexpected voice. To his right stood the number 1 hero, All Might Sama. The blonde bobbed his head at the man respectfully. Even though Naruto had a dislike of poser heroes, All Might was a true hero, that was indisputable. The burly man laughed with his fists driven into his hips, posing. Haha, I was just checking in on you like a normal person. A large thumb extended in his direction, leaving the boy to look uncomfortably at the gesture. The blue-eyed Uzumaki looked quizzically at his superior. Oh, well, I'm alright All Might Sama, the blonde stoically concluded, getting a sweat drop from the 220 centimeters man. I see, I hate to resurface this, well, why didn't you react to those bashing your name? Doesn't it hurt? Maybe even a little? The usual enthusiastic voice lowered considerably as the man stared seriously at the boy. Naruto would be lying to say he didn't feel a bit perturbed, but knowing Nisa had planned his uncovering, lessened the drawback. Of course it does, however. I won't let my emotions blind me. It sounds awfully cliché, but a few words won't stop me from reaching my goals. I have too much to lose by giving in to those who know nothing of my past, the stoic blonde said impassively. All Might nodded, a wave of respect for the UA student washing over him. Yes, you are correct. Your past is your own and so are your ideals and dreams. I've been told that you do not like the majority of heroes, yet you are choosing to be one. Is this a part of these goals, young Uzumaki? The broad-shouldered man asked dignantly. The masked teenager sharpened his visible features, a look rarely seen on his person. Yes, I've only shared my aspirations with a few others and I like to keep my outlook on life private, yet, remembering what I strive to become, there's no better person to speak on this with. Naruto folded his hands over his knees. Why is that? All Might raised an eyebrow, revealing a pale blue orb. The teleportation quirk user lowered his gaze to the concrete glazed floor. When people see you, many fawn over the fact that you're the number one hero or that your fame reaches far and wide. Many fawn over your presence, comparing you to a god or a man who can do no wrong. I too respect you above all heroes, but not for surface-level reasoning. No, All Might is a symbol that keeps society running. You are a man that can force change because above all else, you do not protect out of fame or fortune. The people of Japan place you upon the highest of pedestals, thinking you to be the bearer of righteousness. However, these people have it all wrong. You are the foundation of hero society, a pillar of peace that you solely constructed with your own hands. Naruto returned his eyesight to the man who amusingly reacted to his explanation. I too will be a symbol someday. I too will be a pillar, but in my own way. That's why there's no one better, because nobody else has accomplished what I seek except you. All Might nodded with an unnoticeable emotion marred on his chiseled face. All Might's eyes widened at his words. It can't be. The burly man reminisced on his exact words to his master all those years ago. Two figures stood slightly apart from one another. The backspace of Mustafa lay behind them in an ethereal glow, matching perfectly with the steady river drifting idly in front of them. I want to be a symbol, someone the citizens of Japan can depend on. I want to be a pillar for this peace I will create, but, in my own way. A scrawny blonde with shoulder-length, wavy hair held the straps of his backpack. In front of him stood Nana Shimura, who looked amusingly in his direction, a slight smile adorning her beautiful face. The caped hero faced her body towards the quirkless boy who showed unmatched conviction. Then that is what you will become, Tashinori-kun. She grinned widely at the frozen boy, whose face lay blank. However, there is something I must give you to ensure this reality happens. The muscular woman held her hand away from her body. An unimaginable plethora of colors shined brightly in her palm, reflecting hypnotically off his blue orbs. That day changed his life forever, the day Yagi Tashinori birthed the symbol of peace known as All Might. It was like fate's destiny happening so unexpectedly, as if One for All was calling out for a worthy vessel. It was the same feeling he felt when he met Midoriya for the first time. Then, the number one hero paused. That is what you will become, young Uzumaki. The eighth successor plastered his heroic smile on his features, watching with the same amusement his master must have had. Naruto froze on the spot. All Might believed in him? The long blonde-haired man meant what he said. He could tell. There is no other way for me anyway. The emotionless blonde straightened his wavering eyes. Tenya Ida cannot continue. Shoto Todoroki moves on. President Mike blasted loudly throughout the stadium. Haha, you'd be surprised. Get ready. This is the first step towards that goal. Good luck, young Uzumaki. We'll talk more some other time. Haha. The number one hero left the masked blonde to his own devices before his match. Comically, a dust cloud erupted from where All Might took off. In the arena, Todoroki and Ida expectantly had their scuffle. Even so, Shoto showed exemplary control over his quirk, cornering the engine quirk and leading to his victory. The masked blonde walked towards the center stage where a scowling Bakugo was waiting. There was no doubt in his mind that the ashy blonde would last longer than his previous opponents. Without the use of his main and most powerful components of his quirk, the blue-eyed teenager would be left with his other abilities, not to say his other skills in his arsenal weren't strong on their own. As the blonde Uzumaki glanced lazily at the surrounding fans and heroes, he couldn't help but notice people hanging off their seats in anticipation. It seemed many were excited to see how the ex-villain went up against the top UA student in combat. Hurry up, you lazy bastard! Naruto's crowd watching was interrupted by the now violently fuming 1A student. Stepping up the concrete steps onto the stage constructed by Cementos, Naruto couldn't help but inwardly scoff at the explosion quirk user's impatience of anything. The red-eyed miscreant looked dead focused upon the match. He wasn't going to be underestimated this time. Holy! We are about to get lively with this next matchup. From 1A, the number one entree from the UA exam, Katsuki Bakugo. The spiky blonde-haired boy grinned ceremoniously. And, standing with his hands in his pockets again, from Gen Ed, UA's masked man, Naruto Uzumaki. President Mike's sweat dropped before picking his usual boisterous commentating up once more. The crowd's thunderous calls were heard miles from the stadium as the sounds of hollering only grew. Bakugo got into a fighting stance at the signature announcement of Midnight Fighters ready? Go! Katsuki charged at the blonde. As Naruto released his hands from his pockets, closing in with Bakugo's starting right cross, his sweat glands rumbled in preparation. The blue-eyed teenager crouched into a counter-defensive position, ready to aim the quirk elsewhere. The 1A student blasted his palm's nitroglycerin reaction directly at Uzumaki's face. Swinging his head backwards, Naruto avoided the blast that fired past his blonde locks. His right hand cut into the fold of Bakugo's elbow, redirecting the rest of the shot outwards. The ashy blonde swung his left palm towards the midsection of Naruto. But before he could blink, the UA-clothed legs of Uzumaki wrapped around the extended limb, locked in at the shoulder. Naruto used the momentum of his falling avoidance to launch the exploding quirk user in a suplexing motion. As his front side faced the cement, Bakugo tucked his right limb into his side. With his freed right hand, the aspiring hero propelled his body back to a standing motion, relatively unharmed from the counter. His body language read murderous to Naruto, but a hint of disturbance betrayed his red eyes. Charging in once more by launching his body forward with his palms facing behind his person, Bakugo aimed a sweeping leg kick at his opponent's masked face. However, even with the speed that would dominate others his age, Uzumaki easily ducked, keeping his head focused on the exposed back of Katsuki. Using the exploding boy's monstrous agility against him, Naruto aimed a double-legged mule kick at his lower back. Even so, reading that he was in a compromising position, Bakugo shot his exploding palm at Uzumaki's legs to create space. Katsuki succeeded in doing so, although Naruto had already recognized the countermeasure. Both jumped back a good distance away from each other. One glared menacingly while the other pointed his own outstretched hand. The masked blonde was holding back considerably. What he had planned for the raging UA student would come indiscriminately. Luring Bakugo into a false sense of complacency would seem cruel, but he felt the urge to measure his opponent's strength, in which Bakugo was excellent for their age, far above any of his peers, yet he still lacked the composition to match him evenly. Shinra Tensei, the pang of anti-gravity riveted the front section of the UA arena, getting most to shiver at the sound. Looking across at Bakugo, Naruto could see the distinct satisfaction present in his features. As the wall of convulsion drew closer, the spiky-haired blonde raised both hands at the invisible wall. Ha! Explosions met the Uzumaki's anti-gravity, resulting in a shockwave that cracked the cement beneath their feet. Smoke wafted in pillowing motions, excreting into a lackluster mushroom shape. The ashy blonde's appendages stung involuntarily at the brute force needed to break through the invisible quirk. The impact of said confrontation slid him back a few feet as he dug his heels in for traction, making sure to steady himself. As the dust and debris cleared, Bakugo stood with a few abrasions scattered throughout his form. The slight tension in his forearms alerted the blue-eyed Uzumaki to overexpulsion or a drawback from meeting Shinra Tensei head-on. His UA gym uniform was ripped with holes near his wrists where the impact was the most unrelenting. That was weak. Your quirk stands no chance against my own. Bakugo bluffed handily, although Naruto remained impassive, raising his hand once more. Again? The ashy blonde readied himself, palms dripping with nitroglycerin. Bansho Tenin. Bakugo's eyes widened as he was pulled off his feet. He had planned for this move, but the force was still extremely resistant, making sure his limbs were ineffective as his neck cranked at the force. The masked teenager was sure Katsuki would expect his heel kick in which he delivered to Ishido, so he adjusted accordingly. The exploding quirk user started firing off explosions at Naruto's legs, knowing he couldn't move his limbs in order to directly fire at the Uzumaki. Expecting such an action for the swearing boy as he neared, Naruto jumped off his left leg while simultaneously raising his right. Within a split second, Naruto delivered a heavy boot to the chest of Katsuki Bakugo, effectively knocking the air from his lungs. However, unexpectedly to the 1A student and the surrounding heroes, the ex-villain used the motion of his sweeping leg kick to land another hit to his jaw, Itadori double kick. Bakugo's head snapped vehemently, in a strangely identical movement to the acid quirk user that fought Uzumaki before. Blood shot out of his mouth, plummeting beads of sweat and intermixed toxins to his right. Gah! The ashy blonde gasped for air, still dazed from the hit. Uzumaki's kick sent him spiraling towards the white boundary, but he righted himself in the air, even in his unsteady form. What an insane kick! Did you see that? President Mike rocked Eraserhead's chair. The crowd cheered crazily below, all prone on their faces with the well-placed hit. Aizawa, albeit annoyed with the eccentric Mohawk hero, nodded before picking up his own mic. Uzumaki's skills in hand-to-hand combat keep shining through, even as a pro hero. They're nothing to scoff at, the erasure quirk user said monotonously through his mummified wrappings. Not allowing his opponent to regain his bearings, Naruto jabbed Bakugo in the face, leaving the blonde to grit his teeth in pain and throwing an uncoordinated left hook in response. Unfortunately, the red-eyed teenager missed marginally, getting an uppercut to the chin for his efforts. Stumbling back, Bakugo was getting more desperate, seeing as how he couldn't fight while his vision was blurred. I have to use that. I'm going to lose if I keep going, ga. The ashy blonde doubled over after receiving a gut-wrenching punch to the abdominal region. Saliva dripped from his mouth as a knee was driven into his head with such strength that it knocked him back several feet. It's now or never. I won't lose to an extra like you. Bakugo shakily propelled himself upwards and began to spin with practiced precision. Black pillages of smoke encircled his rapidly spinning body, creating an epicenter of crackling nitroglycerin. This ultimate is called Howitzer Impact, the strongest move in Katsuki's arsenal, which involves him taking to the air, and then using explosions to propel himself in a circular motion to create a tornado. The ensuing twister collects oxygen and momentum to fuel the subsequent explosion. Naruto had pushed Bakugo beyond the point where he felt he needed to push himself to the edge to win. No doubt there was going to be a devastating attack placed solely upon his position. Of course he could have stopped the 1A student before his ultimate, but wanting to see the victorious maniacal smirk on the blonde's face after he was seemingly beaten would be worth the extended seconds. Howitzer Impact. The large twister came crashing down upon the still form of Naruto Uzumaki, who didn't flinch or raise a guard in the slightest. Heroes and fans alike inched out of their seats, waiting for him to do something, but nothing came. Smirking slightly under his mask, betraying his usual stoic face, Naruto flashed under the blanket of the oncoming attack. Even though he didn't want to use his flash ability, none saw him use it because of the erupting chaos on his previous placement. A massive wave of explosions rocked the barriers placed by Cementos, who hastily layered the center stage to absorb the disturbingly strong ultimate. Instantly, black smoke riddled the arena, obscuring the vision of the viewers. The huffing form of Bakugo stood in the middle of his destruction, holding his side, clothes burnt and littered messily, as the smoke from his final and best move in his repertoire. The expectant red eyes expanded to the forehead at the missing body of his opponent. How's this possible? That is an impressive attack, Bakugo-san. A lazy but intrigued voice sounded lowly behind his bent form. The ashy blonde momentarily forgot his pain in order to twist his form reactively towards the masked bastard, yet his eyes suddenly felt heavy. He briefly recognized a quick chop to his neck, but the darkness overcame his form, and fatigue finally restricted his movements. No amount of screaming belligerently in his head to move would stop his slowly crumbling form as it closed in upon the cracked concrete stage. Naruto watched Bakugo's torn form sprawl defeatingly on the ground, now hearing the gasps evident in the masses of fans and heroes who couldn't witness the final clearing because of the dark cloudiness. Now saw him above the 1A student. The oceanic orb teenager didn't have a single evidential feature of struggle against Bakugo's mini-nuke. The sight of the masked blonde with his hands in his pockets glancing down at the boy face down in the concrete was mesmerizing in itself. I have no clue what happened, but Katsuki Bakugo is unable to continue. Winner, Naruto Uzumaki. Even without knowing how the match ended, the fans erupted in pure disbelief. Although Uzumaki had dominated his fight once again, he was still fighting the top UA hero student, and came out completely unscathed by an attack that fringed eyebrows in the closest rows. Uzumaki moves on. After a small break, Shoto Todoroki and Naruto Uzumaki will face off in the last match of the sports festival. Present Mike exclaimed into his mic, drawing many to situate themselves with food and gambling before the fight. Top 10 heroes. The top heroes watched as the billowing waves of black smoke began lifting off the center stage. The UA teacher and hero, Cementos. Walls had been all but obliterated in what Bakugo called his howitzer impact. Such an attack was a pretty clear indicator that the raging personality, Katsuki Bakugo, was not pulling any punches. Well, it was to be expected seeing as how his opponent wasn't pulling punches either. Naruto Uzumaki had dominated once more in this battle. While the 1A student fought more tenaciously and longer than his classmates, the fight still didn't break the 1-minute mark. The masked blonde had Bakugo scrounging for hits, though the red-eyed teenager never landed one. Finally, as their view cleared up, standing adjacent to the unconscious Bakugo, was Naruto Uzumaki, looking the same as he did as he started. His aloof expression would look innocent without the context of this certain situation. Are you serious? What part of his quirk protects him from something like that? We only got to see the aftermath. Bunny hero Mirko whined playfully at the sight of Uzumaki, looking expressionless as always. Not a speck of foul play or struggle riddled his form, leaving the impression that he had something else hidden in his arsenal. Still, there was no doubt in any of their minds that he wouldn't use the smokescreen to cover an ability he didn't want discovered. The fact that this ability kept him completely unscathed was frightening. Regardless, Bakugo's howitzer impact was fairly strong. It wasn't an end-all ultimate. Splendid, truly splendid. Beating the number 1 UA first year in under a minute is an incredibly impressive feat for one of this age. I am curious as to how he avoided the impact completely. Nevertheless, Best Jeanist crossed his legs, looking intriguingly as the stretcher was on standby faster than the other matches. Uzumaki was making the health officials sweat as well, it seemed. Crust teared exaggeratingly. Such a captivating sight. The irony of audience's cluelessness. Yes, it is as if we are watching a spear shakes play, eagerly awaiting the unknown. The man dramatically wiped his comical wisps of tears to the side. Down below, Kigo observed the UA section reactions to seeing their top student beaten. In 1A, many stared on unbelievingly. Not a reaction so far-fetched seeing as how Bakugo's final attack didn't land even after directly hitting Uzumaki head-on. It seemed the students substituted talking for gawking at the usual victorious ashy blonde getting carried off by the medical team. It was probably a massive hit to their pride to see another one of their best, if not the best, be bested by someone they had thought below them not too long ago. Suddenly, Bakugo's previous redhead opponent and the Midoriya kid ran off to the medic on standby as their classmates yelled after them. 1B was a different story, though the shocking surprise was evident on their premature faces. A hint of pride swelled the majority at seeing another one of their rivals drop in battle, and one was cackling madly, the Kopigaki if he remembered correctly. Bakugo-kun still showed very impressive strength. I don't believe the loss will hurt his stock as an intern, but I do believe someone like him whose pride runs on their hero capability will not be satisfied in the slightest. Ryuko Tatsuma placed her hands in her lap. The others around her nodded agreeingly. Losing a fight was always damaging for a hero. But for someone like Katsuki Bakugo who thrived in the combat environment, the loss would hurt more. Gang Orca added with his arms crossed. Yes, Uzumaki-kun was too much of a match for Bakugo-kun, but the boy's ingenuity with his self-created ultimate definitely shows his extraordinary potential. The large killer whale-head-shaped man said lowly, but his hint of admiration was not lost on the others. Gang Orca really was a big softy sometimes. I mean, there's still Endeavor's son after all. But I'm not sure if it will be a different turnout. I think Bakugo and Todoroki are about even in terms of strength, so. Remi Yasujiyama, or Mirko, said, looking in all directions for a certain fiery red-haired brute before she spoke. Kigo scoffed, you better hope Endeavor never hears you say something about Shoto. The big guy is extremely territorial about his son being the strongest of the new generation. The red-winged hero sighed at the end, leaning his head backwards in a napping motion. He really respected Endeavor, maybe the same as All Might, but the man needed some parenting guidance. Now wow, the final showdown of this year's UA Sports Festival. This is for the 24 million viewers at home. Make some noise wherever you are. Yeah, the UA teacher and commentator, President Mike, snapped their attention back to center stage. The top heroes swore they heard the stadium creak under the unrelenting cheers from their attendees. The final match had come at last. Center stage. Todoroki entered from the 1A locker room directly after his encounter with his old man, Endeavor. The large man was ecstatic for him to finally be over his tantrum following the events of his match with Midoriya. At the time of using his left, Shoto was relieved in a sense to finally use his flames. The tempting coat of blistering heat almost overtook his will to only use his mother's side, and now more than ever, he wanted to show that he could go to the top without his old man's fire. Endeavor stood a section up in the stands with his arms crossed, hawking his greatest masterpiece's movements. Uzumaki would be a great test for Shoto to use both sides on. The boy was strong and a great obstacle for his offspring to maneuver. Of course, he had already filed for Shoto and Uzumaki to become interns for his agency, though Uzumaki came only during the cavalry battle. The powerful heroes he could cultivate if he landed both. Yes, they would be top 10 heroes in 5 years minimum. The lazily swaying Naruto Uzumaki entered from Gen Ed's miniature locker room. Many would think that he was acting so casually because of his already landed hero course position thanks to previous win. But the hands in pockets act was actually how he was the majority of the time, regardless of the scenario. The decibel level rose to deafening levels as their fight was set to begin. Both stoic teenagers stared instinctively at each other, one with a boring gaze that slightly perturbed the other. The gentle breeze eased the peltering heat that caressed the ground level, leaving both competitors' hair to ruffle randomly. Ah yeah! Let's get this baby going. He's had some tough battles, but his solidity has yet to disappoint. From Class 1A, the freezing hot Shoto Todoroki, President Mike rumbled, getting a dangerous glance from Shoto after hearing the hot part. Aizawa leveled his own mic to his face. Todoroki has proven himself one of the strongest with his ice and flames. Not many can match his forceful attacks that have rummaged through all of his opponents. His skills definitely improve as he fights, leaving him to be consistently dangerous to fight an endurance battle with. The Eraser hero praised his arguably strongest student, drawing much to agree with his analysis. Thank you, Eraser Head. Todoroki's challenger has dominated his way through the final rounds, winning all rounds in under a minute. He's completely taken the UA courses by surprise. From Gen Ed, the inevitable Imperial, Naruto Uzumaki. Yeah! President Mike screamed heartily through the surrounding sections. The Montoni commentator to the left of the voice quirk user felt the urge to intervene once more. Uzumaki has used every advantage he could scavenge to pull himself through the early rounds. His tactically sound mind left many of the hero course students to dismiss his presence as a fluke, allowing him to sneak through the obstacle course and the cavalry battle. His intelligence is thoroughly compatible with his impressive quirk, showing his impactful potential by beating 2 top 5, 1A students, in the single combat rounds, the man said boringly. But the hint of pride was not lost of some who knew the hero. Hizashi, his oldest classmate and fellow teacher, wrapped an arm around his shoulder and stuck a thumbs up at the camera recording them. Midnight stood with a hand on her hip, looking over both boys. Fighters ready? Both nodded minimally. Go. The snap of her whip overtook the starting bell. Shoto started the match with his direct ice attack, pointing and scurrying at the masked blonde. Expecting such a straightforward forward assault, Naruto's side flipped into a sprint, kicking up dust in his wake, headed for the heterochromia-eyed boy, stomping his right foot again. Shards of ice raced indiscriminately at the blonde, who repeated his previous movement. The approaching icicles couldn't keep up with the fluent agility of the blonde, who easily avoided attacks that his classmates had tremendous trouble with. The shuffling footsteps of the masked blonde alerted the 1A student to throw up a barreling ice wall, trying his best to keep the distance between them. Todoroki knew he didn't want to engage the blonde in hand-to-hand combat, knowing that the blue-eyed Gen Ed student had beaten Bakugo, who was probably the best hand-to-hand combat specialist in their year. Distance battle was his major strength, thus limiting Uzumaki to fight his own quirk with his gravity manipulation quirk. Forcing the masked blonde to use his abilities against his ice would only lead to his victory, knowing his ice could prevent such attacks at a moment's notice. The problem was that Uzumaki was luring him into attacking gaps with his ice that he didn't want to. He knew he couldn't compete up close with the Gen Ed student. Ito was proof of that weakness, but he still kept to his strategy of distance endurance. The towering blades of ice began to block Todoroki's view of the blonde because of the thickness of his quirk. Standing in a ready stance meant for defense. His right heel was raised so that the ball of his foot was prepared to draw a protective barrier. Bansho Tenin, the pang he had studied from the masked blonde's match with Ishido and Bakugo, alerted him to tie his body down to the cement ground. Ice enshrouded his legs to prevent his body from being pulled against his will. The force of the quirk made his upper body feel as if someone was trying to forcefully drag his body out of a tight spot, which made him grimace because of the strain. Todoroki's ice had kept the teenager stuck in place, but Naruto had predicted such a plan. The way Shoto was using his ice suggested his want to keep Naruto away. Of course, that was the right choice, but Naruto didn't lack strength from any measurable range like the red and white-haired teenager. Also, flames had yet to be used, and the collection of frost on the heterochromia boy's right side was evident enough. He wasn't Midoriya. He didn't care if Todoroki used all his strengths or not. None of that was his concern. His only objective was to win, and if Shoto held back his true power, then he would take advantage of such as his opponent. Over the first 20 seconds of the match, Todoroki had unknowingly created a semicircle of ice, trying to limit Naruto's fighting capability to a test of endurance. This meant either Todoroki was disregarding his one ability he had only shown once against Tokoemi, or he deemed it not as threatening as Shinra Tensei and Bansho Tenin. From where he was perched upon a shard of ice, the blonde could see Todoroki discreetly looking for him. He didn't need to search long as Naruto dropped from above and landed in a crouch. His back was to the semicircle of ice Shoto had created, trying to keep Naruto from getting up close. Now if only Todoroki fell for his ploy. Seeing Uzumaki begin to sprint once more after appearing from above his wall, Shoto erected a barrier of impossibly sharp ice shards to separate them once more. Amenotejikara Naruto switched places instantly with Todoroki, locking him in a ring of ice that his attack forged. Now would be the test of whether Todoroki would use his flames or not to melt his way out. Shoto instantly felt his body being constricted tightly, panicking momentarily as he sought to block Uzumaki's approach. Suddenly, he felt as if he blacked out, having the feeling of disorientation as he reappeared in the position Uzumaki was once in. His different-colored eyes widened upon the realization that the masked blonde used the switch mechanism of his quirk. All around him were peaks of ice he had created throughout the fight, encircling his form like a small ravine or pit. Immediately noticing the irregularities of his ice attacks leaving gaps for attacks from above, Shoto found he had been lured into a trap of his own creation. The masked blonde completely cornered him, and the fight had just begun. Out of seemingly nowhere, a fist connected to his cheek, leaving the 1A student to stumble to his left. Todoroki felt the stinging pain in his cheek, but chose to ignore it in order to shoot a random structure of ice in the opposite direction from where the attack came from. Shoto began to feel the coldness of his unrelenting attacks begin to take effect on his body. The more he attacked without his left side, the more his body would shut down with the drawback of his right side's continuous usage. Fortunately, he had been in this position before with his quirk, and dealing with the cold was child's play. Clamoring of steps against his ice ran behind his form, getting the half and half user to turn and force a protective barrier hastily. Todoroki relaxed into a stance, waiting for the masked blonde to go through or around the wall. An unexpected boot connected to his ribs from behind, causing the heterochromia teenager to grip his right side. He was panicking about not being able to see the blonde's approach. Shoto knew he heard Uzumaki coming from behind, so how could he have been hit from another blind spot? Is Uzumaki using guerrilla warfare tactics? Todoroki can't seem to locate him. Evidently, the crowd could see the blonde stalking Shoto like a predator to its prey. He weaved in between the holes of ice in order to hit the half and half user from his deceiving blind spots, and then jumped and flipped away, hiding once more. From what the heroes in the stands could observe, Uzumaki was using the isolation of Todoroki in the center of his pit to his advantage. The masked blonde was ingeniously using the echoing reflectiveness of Shoto's eyes to force the 1A student to guess where he was coming from. This left many to question why Todoroki wasn't using his flames to remove himself from his compromising position. If he kept letting Uzumaki do as he pleased, the fight would end quicker than the blonde's semi-final match. As the hits from all over rained down upon his weakening body, Shoto stubbornly refused to use his left side. The intervals between shots to his body were quick and unpredictable, leaving him no options to choose from. In those half-delirious moments of being beaten in different directions, he remembered his mother's face that fateful day. He felt as if he was betraying her when he used his right side. Every time he was tempted to edge his way out of a scenario that called for his fire, that horrified face holding the kettle of boiling water reminded him. He couldn't use his left side, not until he came to peace with himself. He only needed his right side, his mother's side, to be a great hero, no, the best hero. With a newfound confidence, Todoroki erected himself and the surrounding ice around his form into the air above the pit, creating a large platform of ice. Fans screamed in excitement at seeing the UA hero student finally able to find a way out. Todoroki has taken the fight to the skies. He basically reset the center stage floor 15 meters in the sky. Is he crazy? Present Mike observed the humongous barges of ice holding up the flat platform higher up in the arena. Todoroki was resetting the fight with a base that fit him best. Naruto leapt upwards, landing on the icy floor. His opponent was huffing, but the glint of determination and renewed vigor shone through his mismatched eyes. For a moment, the blue-eyed teenager thought the 1A student would give up. I know what you're trying to do, Uzumaki. It won't work. It never will. Todoroki shot a straightforward attack, his voice carrying throughout the front rows. Hidden behind the frontal construct was a hidden shard of ice, aiming directly for where he had avoided the first pillar. Naruto could hear the crowd cheering the half-and-half user on excitedly. Unable to move his body quick enough, Naruto raised his palm in a familiar gesture. Shinra Tensei, the anti-gravity slammed into the jagged points. Although they didn't shatter, the attack was stopped abruptly. As the fans started getting louder, Naruto realized Shoto had used a wave of ice to surf around his form and attack his backside. The blonde turned his body 90 degrees to raise his other palm at the incoming pillar. Shinra Tensei, the ping spewed throughout the stadium, louder than his previous time. The brute strength behind Todoroki's attack was noteworthy, but ultimately still not enough to fluster his stance. Do as you wish, it makes no difference to me, he blankly stated with an emotionless tone. Naruto jumped at another ice structure charging at his chest, seeking to impale. As time continued, the speed and height of Todoroki's constructs were slowly losing ground, signifying his frostbite taking over. The masked blonde front flipped over sharded pieces closing in on his form, leaving him on the upper side of the structure. Using his momentum, Naruto planted his feet before shooting towards the slightly iced-over stature of Shoto Todoroki. Using his arms to propel a spin, Naruto twisted clockwise and swung a downward leg. Leaf Hurricane. Shoto's now cold limbs struggled to respond to the abnormal speed in which Uzumaki had come at him with. His flames would be able to keep him away. He extended his left arm to fire his flames at the blonde. And then out of the corner of his eye, Endeavor stood smugly, ready for him to release his flames against his foe. No, he already promised himself he wouldn't. Without the use of his flames, Naruto's heel blasted through the guard and connected with the top of his head. The immeasurable pain his head was pounded with completely overrode his adrenaline and folded his upper body. Just like Uzumaki's opponents before, Todoroki was going to end up the same, though as darkness began to shut his already slowly imploding body, he smiled. Not because he lost. No, he was upset he was going to lose, but in the end, Shoto stayed true to himself. Even with the temptation of using his old man's flames to combat, he refused even as he was bitterly defeated. Todoroki's body collapsed onto his knees, falling sideways onto the ice platform as they gave out. Naruto was standing to his right, gazing passively at his downed opponent. Silence reigned briefly. The sound of present mic echoed dignantly. Todoroki is down. Todoroki is down. Winner by incapacitation, Naruto Uzumaki. In 58 seconds the fight was over, just 6 seconds longer than Katsuki Bakugo. The medical team had an on-site hero fly them up to collect Shoto, who laid unconscious next to the masked blonde. Naruto Uzumaki wins the sports festival in a flashy last dance. Coming in, Naruto wasn't even ranked in the top 50, but today he's walking out number 1. Please gather the students for the medal ceremony. The UA sections began to clear, though 1A was slower on the get-up. A depressive atmosphere was showering the entire group, leaving many of the other students to give them a wide berth. After a short period of time, Cementos and the UA crew began to chisel down the ice structure as Todoroki was being carted off. Endeavor followed closely behind, giving Naruto a smoldering gaze out of his peripheral vision. The media swarmed into the front rows, all preparing for the podium address, in which All Might would be designated to handle. Fans cheered the Gen Ed boy's name in excitement as his masked face was being plastered all over the front pages of Twitter, Headpage, and InstaThought. Nemuri watched him slouch with his hands in his pockets, obviously off-put by having to sit still while people snapped pictures and videos of him. The dark purple-haired woman was going to save him from all the flashing lights, and maybe steal a few of those cameras for their attention. Midnight gathered at Naruto's side, sitting a tad shorter in height. You did amazingly, Naruto-kun. I'm so proud. She smiled genuinely at him, giggling at the constipated furrow look on his face. Thank you, Kayama-sensei, he responded blandly, receiving a pout from his brief 1C teacher. The expressionless boy looked away, ignoring her the best he could. No, that just won't do. Come on, I'm trying to congratulate you. Don't be rude, mister. She lightly slapped his cheek, turning his head back to her deceivingly blue eyes. The woman pointed her red-crusted nail into his chest. You're welcome anyways, though. Maybe you were expecting a different gift. Namuri seductively pushed her assets together, trying to fluster the boy. Surprisingly, a tint of pink danced across his cheeks, though barely visible because of the black compression mask. Outside the stadium, heroes on patrol. Empty. Lady angrily looked at the screen, seeing the old hag using her seductiveness on Uzumaki. She was way too close for her liking. What does that old bat think she's doing? That's borderline rape. Get your sag granny tits away from the kid. I saw him first. The beautiful pale blonde woman pointed her fingers belligerently at the screen shown outside the stadium. Kamui Wood's sweat dropped at his partner's display. Why is you mad? She does the same exact thing. He shook his masked head disappointingly. Back in the arena. Oh, so that is what you wanted. Let me see what I can do, Blondie-kun. The seductress's nail traveled up to the underside of his chin, before purring lightly with her lips pursed. Her teasing was unfortunately interrupted by the other students starting to fill out the field. Seeing her predicament, Midnight dropped her finger, much to the silent relief of the oceanic orbed teenager. Oops, maybe some other time. She brought her finger up to her lips, winking with a sultry grin. As she walked away swinging her full hips, Naruto cursed himself as he followed the movement unconsciously, gaining a beaming smile from Midnight as she looked over her shoulder. What the hell just happened? The short but weirdly hot experience made his normally stoic cheeks red. Why was Midnight-sensei feeling you up? The familiar voice of Shinso spoke with a hint of jealousy. The purple-haired boy's usually disinterested bag eyes were now curled to his forehead. How was he supposed to answer that? She came out of nowhere and looked him up and down hungrily. I don't know, he hung his head slightly, leaving the brainwashing quirk user to gaze weirdly as he now mimicked his pocket action. Well, she kind of does that to everyone, but normally half-jokingly. That was something else, Shinso judged. The masked blonde next to him curiously mused in his head on the reason. 1B flooded into the group next to Gen Ed. Itsuka waved happily in his direction, giving him a smile. The copy quirk user next to her gave him a smug smirk and nodded in the direction of 1A. The clouded atmosphere around 1A almost dropped the temperature. Some of the students glared at him, while others nervously hid behind their classmates like he was going to attack them next. It seemed the Hero Corps students didn't like the fact that he hurt their classmates and friends. Not that it was personal or anything. He couldn't see their top two students, so Bakugo and Todoroki were probably still recovering, but in the next few minutes, he didn't doubt Recovery Girl would have the boys functional enough to receive their medals. 1C encircled around Naruto, congratulating and thanking him for representing their class. Shinso's performance was great, no one would disagree, but Naruto's was beyond stellar. He surpassed everyone's expectations and took out Endeavor's son and the number 1 UA hero student in the finals. Never before in the history of UA had a Gen Ed student won the entire thing. The only one who came close was Shoita Aizawa, but even then, the now 1A teacher only reached the semi-finals. Naruto straightened his vision at the commentator's booth. Seeing Aizawa in his mummified form looking down at him gave the blonde a semblance of pride. The blue-eyed Uzumaki saw him give a small nod of acknowledgement, causing Naruto to grin unnoticeably under his mask. All of this was made possible by one of the people he respected the most in this world. This truly was the only chance he needed, and he had accomplished his mission Nizu and Aizawa had given him behind closed doors. A single day was all that was needed to completely reroute his path, where that unfavorable direction would have kept him churning on that dark road of despair. Ah! Todoroki and Bakugo are finally able to join the last charade. Thank you, Recovery Girl. The leather jacket man to Aizawa's right pointed towards the two bandaged boys, one with a face of conflict on, and the other, well, his rage was barely being contained on the tattered exploding quirk user's face. The two tunneled into their classmates' rows, causing most to fret over their injuries, but more so Todoroki than the ashy blonde who threatened to fight Kirishima and Kaminari. Both students glanced in Naruto's direction, whereas Todoroki's expression held the same. Bakugo was glaring laser beams for eyes through his form, trying to make him explode with his feral scowl. Now the man, the myth, the legend, All Might, will be conducting the podium positions. President Mike motioned to the flying man jumping erratically from his high-rise booth. The tremor of his laughs sounded intensely through the rows of fans, leaving most to stand with untamed excitement. The burly blonde hero landed confusingly soft on the ground after dropping from such a height. I am here. to award the top 3 UA students. To his right, 3 cases opened, revealing 3 classification medals identical to Olympic tokens, though instead of the rings, the symbol of UA stood out most prominently. Cascading applause reigned in comfortably, giving the number 1 hero time to speak. In third, this student showed tremendous potential and heart with a widely versatile and powerful quirk. From Class 1A, Katsuki Bakugo. Said boy scoffed, receiving anything but first place was enraging. I want to wring that blonde bastard's neck. Rah! His eyes glazed over in pure unchallenged anger. All Might wrapped his hands around the blue and red ribbon, walking steadily towards the ashy blonde with his usual smile. Young Bakugo, you've done very well. Do not allow your emotions to betray your efforts. I hope to see you become a great hero one day, so don't be ruffled, for I see a bright future. As your teacher, I am proud to have you as my student. Haha! The boy begrudgingly accepted the medal by leaning forward. It seemed All Might's word calmed the boy to his usual look of anger riddling his face. The bronze medallion swayed slightly from his upwards movement, getting the piece to shine befittingly. Walking back towards the silver case, the UA students swooned over All Might wearing his Silver Age costume. In second, this student showed great strength and a destiny for greatness with his opposite elements operating simultaneously. From Class 1A, Shoto Todoroki. Shoto contemplated his resolve as All Might closed in with his medal, but knowing what he was going to do directly after the festival lightened his rather vengeful feelings towards Endeavor. Young Todoroki, you are a wonderful student and an even better hero candidate. I hope to work alongside you in the future as you climb your way through UA and the hero world. Stay true to yourself and your powers. Only then will you never lose your way. The symbol of peace praised the obviously distraught boy caught in a web of family affairs. Shoto was going to become a great hero. Of that, All Might had no doubt. Todoroki stood on the second-place podium platform, proudly beaming with a facade of stoicism to cover his small smile. He watched the overly large man return towards the last and final case with a prideful smile. And in first, this student showed intelligence and skill beyond what was expected of him. From Gen Eds 1C, Naruto Uzumaki. Thunderous chants and cheers showered in, causing the camera crews of Japan's top news stations to flash lenses and reporters to the front rows to capture the unforgettable moment. The bright blonde-haired hero reminisced the small conversation he had with Naruto. I too will be a symbol someday. I too will be a pillar, but in my own way. The elements of his own conviction shone brightly in a person who was betrayed and left for the dark. Just like himself, that is what you will become. His master's words echoed in his mind. All Might observed the boringly lidded blonde, standing idly with his hands in his pockets. Even so, his sky-blue eyes betrayed his determined and respectful eyes. Young Uzumaki, you've earned your spot in the hero course with your own undying conviction. This world, this country, these heroes, including myself, turned our back on you before. Cameras zeroed in on the symbol of peace. The UA students gazed at the melancholy expression on the blonde hero's face, wondering what All Might was talking about. Even as the entirety of life's misgivings piled upon your restless shoulders. You persevered, however, your story is far from over, and I have the utmost respect for you, young Uzumaki. In the future I, All Might, will be waiting for you to become a great hero, a hero that will rock the confines of society. Shouts of encouragement embodied the entirety of UA Stadium. All Might gripped Naruto's shoulder, smiling proudly. The students of UA witnessed the scene with many surrounding questions. Heroes turned their back on Uzumaki? Misgivings? Utmost respect? The number 1 hero knew something about Naruto Uzumaki, possibly something catastrophically evident in the masked blonde's past. To them, the undeniably brutal, now hero student, was an entire mystery that they weren't entitled to know. What had Naruto Uzumaki said or done to get the utmost respect from fucking All Might? Izuku watched shockingly as All Might, his master, spoke with the same shockingly serious tone as the day he bequeathed one for all to him. Was he being replaced for betraying his mentor's wishes with performing to his standards? How could he blame him though? He messed up so much during the sports festival that he hadn't beseeched All Might's wish for him to have his I am here moment. However, just like the rest of his classmates, Midoriya wondered about the blonde's past. How could he ignore the part about how heroes supposedly turned their back on him? Heroes always saved people. They always protected, So what was so discerning about Uzumaki's past that All Might himself was regretful? Top 10 heroes. The hell is going on here? I don't like being kept out of the loop. Mirko squinted suspiciously at All Might and Yue. The secretiveness of Uzumaki's past did not sit well with her. Kigo nodded in agreement. Much to the bunny hero's shock, All Might told us he was an ex-villain, that he was desperate over everything. It's probably nothing exaggeratingly shocking. But what else could they still be keeping from us? He said, locking his eyes onto the masked blonde. Man, he really wanted Naruto Uzumaki as an intern. But if the guy had major baggage, that would really take away from his free time. 10 minutes later, Yue began to clear the stadium of fans and visiting heroes. The outing for the hero school had been one of their best of all time, raking in insane viewership and tons of funding for school programs. All of it was ingeniously planned by Nizu, even if most teachers at Yue were reluctant about his reasoning previously. After the USJ incident, Nizu formulated his plan to show a strong and united front to the League of Villains while also helping provide his students and teachers with funds for their future endeavors towards pro-heroship. His answer came spectacularly, falling right in his mouse bear dog lap. Naruto Uzumaki would show his caliber of skill whilst being announced as an ex-villain, thereby showing the League of Villains that Yue had completely snagged a future powerful quirk user turned from the life of villainy. Regarding funds and viewership, just the presence of the blonde's engagements, and the development of an underdog, the maniacal side of Nizu cackled madly at the perfectly orchestrated management. And everything went off without a hitch, though massive hits to the pride of 1A suffered primarily. 4 of their top 10 students were handily defeated by a single person, none even lasting more than a minute. Most of the UA staff hoped that the embarrassing defeat would stir determination in their students to never leave such an outcome again. Now they had to prepare for the intern draft, where most if not all of 1A and 1B would find hero agencies. Class 1A internship draws. 2 days later. The solemn mood of 1A had lessened over the couple days they had to recover from the sports festival. Some of the injured students such as Todoroki and Bakugo had been restored to their full form by their local recovery girl. Ah! I'm just so excited. I wonder if I'll get any offers although I didn't make it far. Toru squealed while talking to the other girls in 1A. They all sat in a circle around their desks talking excitedly about their chances to attend hero agencies. Mina giggled while interlocking her fingers. Don't worry, Toru-chan. I got beat pretty badly, but even I have a chance. The pink-skinned girl reassured the invisible girl happily. At least your performance was better than jamming way over here. Jiro pointed her thumb to the electrification quirk user behind her, resulting in giggling girls and a crying Kaminari at the girls thinking he's uncool. Momo had her legs crossed in a sophisticated position with her back ridden of any slouching. Many of our matches will be a setback. Regretfully mine as well. I would prepare for lower-tier agencies, but I can't help but hope for a chance with the top 10 hero. She giddily trailed off her serious notion with melodic giggles. Well, let's do our best then if it does come to that. Uraraka raised her fist, puffing her cheeks with determination to be a better hero. The remaining girls looked at each other, and did the same as well, striking poses and imitating taking down villains within the next week. Aoyama just thought they were practicing their hero poses, so he joined in as well. Aizawa walked into the scene of his female students all raising their fists, albeit annoying. It wasn't his first time witnessing their weirdness. Sit down. The erasure quirk user had students immediately scramble to their desks, knocking into each other chaotically. When they were finally settled in, Aizawa displayed each student's allotted internships to choose from. As I'm sure all of you know, internships are next week. This means choosing an agency to intern for, which will help you experience how the Real Pros operate. I'd recommend picking wisely. All of you need to improve on something with your quirk and or your physical or mental applications. Now, I'm going to read off your names and the number of agencies to pluck from. I will also notify you of top 10 hero agencies in these announcements. All of 1A inched out of their chairs, wanting to get the agencies they were striving for. A picture of Oyama displayed on the screen. Yuga Oyama, 0. For finishing outside of the top 42 in the obstacle course, there are no options for internships for you. Please see me for extra training next week. The long blonde-haired teenager lowered his head with a small say no. No stars twinkled sporadically like before. Next was a picture of a cute pink-skinned girl smiling widely. Mina Ashido, 23. Many were impressed with your cavalry battle performance and your quirk adaptiveness. Most felt you were stuck with an overwhelming opponent, so there was still lots of interest in you. Your most prominent agencies will be under Cow Lady, Team Ida 10, and a small shadowing of Bubble Girl. The acid quirk user smiled happily at her choices, plus Bubble Girl was really cute. The familiar green hair and stretched face of Ajui replaced the horned girl, Tsuyu Ajui 18. Your observers knew you were best in the water, so some viewers marked you for water-related agencies. Your most prominent agencies will be under, doesn't matter, Team, Breaking the Fourth Wall, and Selkie. Ajui's eyes widened at the chance to work with the popular seal hero. She would look over the others, but Selkie was her number one pick as of this moment. A serious-looking blue-haired teenager in glasses came upon the screen. Tenya Ida, 396. Your quirk drew a lot of attention from higher-tier agencies. Many were extremely impressed with pushing Todoroki into a corner, and because of that, your in-turn stock increased drastically. Your most prominent agencies will be under, doesn't matter, nobody. And, he won't choose this anyway. Ida narrowed his eyes at his obviously good picks. Many of his classmates shared the same opinion. But none of that mattered with his brother's near murderer still roaming Hosa's city. Uraraka's bubbly face happily appeared on the board. Ochako Uraraka, 40. Many eyes were drawn to your quirk conjunction with your above-average strategy against Bakugo. Though you took unnecessary risks, many were willing to overlook those missteps to help improve your hero capabilities. Your most prominent agencies will be under Noon, Non-Existent Hero, and Gunhead. The girl grinned widely at the strong and popular Gunhead choice, although she wished 13 would have given her a chance. A normal-looking teenager popped up shortly after. Mashireo Ojiro, 5. You were out of commission for the cavalry battle due to Hitoshi Shinso's quirk. Some took pity on you for such and allowed you to intern at their agency due to your previous titles in the martial arts. Your most prominent pick will be Johnny Lawrence, Cobra Kai hero. Ojiro's eyes twitched at the irony of his best choice. Kaminari's smirking face replaced Ojiro's plain one. Denki Kaminari, 31. Heroes scouting you believe your quirk could be evolutionized under their guidance. Therefore, many heroes with abilities similar to yours or offering guidance and strategy asked for you. Your most prominent agencies will be under Electric Hero 1, Heroing for Dummies, and Chess Hero, Checkmate. The boy grinned widely before being pointed out by Kyoka that they mostly just wanted to improve his fried brain. A spiky head of red hair found its way onto the screen. Ejiro Kirishima, 112. Surprisingly, although your fighting style was as straightforward as your quirk, a lot of agencies wanted you for your tenacity. Your most prominent agencies will be under Meathead Hero 2, Fourth Kind. Ejiro started yelling in excitement at landing one of his favorite heroes. An odd-shaped head plastered with a shy smile, displayed behind Aizawa. Kujikuda, 6. There's not much to say, few have a similar quirk to yours, so the number is low, none are prominent agencies, I'm afraid. The shy and quiet nodded downcasting. Rikito's big lips were zoomed in on unintentionally, getting an embarrassed reaction from the Sugar Rush user. Rikito Sato, 21. Your reasons are similar to Kirishima. I'm afraid none of your agencies are prominent either. The muscular brown-haired teenager sadly looked away. A masked face with a blue mask appeared quickly. Mizo Shoji, 45. Team Mineta had done very well in the cavalry battle until the last moments. Much of that was due to your near mastery of your quirk functions. However, there is still much room to grow. Your most prominent choice will be under Jaiges. Shoji was amazed to get the prison guard hero, who also had multiple arms. Next was the emo of 1A, Kyokujiro, 82. Your quirk has been widely sought after for sidekicks in the pro hero world. Knowing this, you will have a lot of expectations to meet. Your most prominent agencies are under Death Arms, Sound Hero, and Amo Hero. She felt easily tempted to pick her favorite hero she modeled herself after, but she was looking to improve herself, not run off to be a fangirl. Hanta came up next. Hanta Siro, 94. Quirks like yours are extremely useful for internships. Many of these heroes use wire or string for their quirks. Your most prominent agencies will be under Spider-Man, Rope Guy, and Duct Tape Dude. He grinned widely at seeing some of his favorites who influenced his moves. The rare crow-headed student appeared looking menacingly at the camera. Fumikage Tokoemi, 127. Many were looking forward to you making it to the later rounds. Unfortunately, you were matched up with the tournament winner and lost that chance. Your stock lowered slightly, but not too much. Your most prominent agencies will be under Pigeon Head Prospector. Ravenhead Revenger, and Worm Boy, the sentient quirk user, mumbled something about hating worms. The handsome face of Todoroki drew some blushing faces from the girl crowd. Shoto Todoroki, 3978. You displayed excellent skill, although coming up short in the end. All were incredibly impressed with your second-round battle with Midoriya, who had a counter to your quirk. The calls coming in for you were non-stop. So use your time wisely to sort through your choices. You landed 2 top 10 hero agencies, but these firms wanted you the most. MT, Lady, Iwabumi, and Endeavor. Midoriya turned, expecting to see a face of rage, but Shoto was calm as ever, taking it easily in stride. Although getting female heroes that didn't really fit well with Shoto's quirk confused him. With no head in a picture and the only identifying feature being a UA collar, Toru pouted. Toru Hagakure, 57. Like some here, your quirk is great for specialization, but over-reliance will only lead you astray. You have the power to be stealthy and strong with the right teacher. Choose wisely. Your most prominent choice will be Vanishing Man, the visible wiener hero. Toru's sweat dropped at seeing her choice. A familiar frowning face took the place of the invisible head. Katsuki Bakugo, 3118. Most heroes believe you to be a top 10 hero candidate for the future. Don't disappoint. You landed 3 top 10 hero agencies in Best Jeanist. Orochimaru and Ryukyu. The savagely grinning teenager almost blew up his desk in excitement. Ochako blushed slightly upon seeing Deku displayed on the screen. Izuku Midoriya, 1. All the heroes that had interest in you disappeared immediately after seeing your self-destructive quirk. Your one choice is a great one. You might want to talk to All Might about him. Gran Torino is your only choice. But he was a top 10 hero 30 years ago, so it shouldn't matter. Aizawa received a saddened but perturbed look at only landing a single agency. Many of the others felt sorry for Izuku, seeing as how he was probably one of the stronger 1A students. If only he knew Gran Torino didn't have an agency at all. The class perv followed shortly after. Minoru Mineta, 26. Your quirk captured some attention, and some were impressed with your cavalry battle performance. Your most prominent choice will be MT, Lady. The purple ball-head boy drooled uncontrollably, grossing out the others around him. Finally, the black ponytail girl of Momo Yaoyorozu, 175. Your recommendation held a lot of ground in the pre-stocks, but with your lackluster decision-making, your stock dropped tremendously. Don't let it beat you down. Learn from it and make sure it doesn't happen again. Your most prominent agencies will be under Iwabumi, Bubble Girl, or your pick of Mandalay or Pixie Bob from the Wild Wild Pussycats. She nodded determinedly. No way was she going to waste her chance to improve after losing her confidence so rapidly. Huh! Sensei, why are there 21 slots on the board? Mina asked after many had their suspicions upon the reason for a 21. Slowly, the eyes of Class 1A grew agape. Upon the board was a picture of the sports festival winner, Naruto Uzumaki. His half-lidded oceanic eyes and handsome masked face gained another round of blushes from the girls. Naruto Uzumaki, a potential 1A or 1B student after placing first in the UA Sports Festival. 4,217 offers from agencies across Japan after taking out 3 of the top 5 students of Class 1A in the tournament round. His quirk usage and hand-to-hand combat are unmatched at his age. Beating all opponents severely where none reached the minute mark, he landed 10 top 10 agencies in All Might's recommended Sir Naitai, Endeavor, Hawks, Best Jeanist, Mirko, Crust, Wash, Orochimaru, Ryukyu, and Gang Orca. He also landed agencies with the 11th through 29th ranked heroes. Aizawa watched the deathly silent room of his students look at the board crazily. No doubt it was hard for them to believe, but they needed to see this. Why are you showing this to us, Aizawa-sensei? Is it punishment for losing the sports festival? Ida spoke up for his class, seeing as how he needed to fulfill his role as class rep. The scruffy dark-haired hero shook his head. No. I'm showing this to you because I need you all motivated to become better students and future heroes. 1A was once the top class of Japan first years a few days ago. Now, you and 1B are the laughing stocks that had a Gen Ed student embarrass you on live television in front of 24 million people. I didn't show his intern stock because I wanted you to mope. No, use this as fuel to get better and catch up to Uzumaki. I know all of you strive to be the number 1 hero or a great hero in general. But if you continue on this UA high road path, Uzumaki will take that dream away from you. Class dismissed. Aizawa walked out of the room. never looking behind him to see the reactions of his students. Couple days later, Naruto and the 41 other intern candidates were coming in and out of Principal Niza's office for hours on end. All had come prepared with top choices of agencies to choose from, expecting to walk out of the UA office with the final choice. The masked blonde was scheduled later in the day to avoid possible confrontation with some of 1A's more upset students. The amount of agencies he had to pick from was ridiculous, but he had zeroed in down to a few he was somewhat adamant to work under. His Gen Ed classmate and possible hero course candidate, Hitoshi Shinso, opened the oak-framed door, giving Naruto a sparing glance. Shinso had a decent 25 offers from some mid- and low-tier agencies, but it seemed the boy was more motivated to reach an alternative solution. "What's the verdict?" the blue-eyed Uzumaki asked curiously. The brainwashing quirk user stood in front of Naruto's chair as he responded, "Well, I was offered one-on-one training with Eraserhead here at UA for the week. I took it over the opposing mediocrity I was going to be stuck in. At least Aizawa-san is the competent type that I admire in a hero." Naruto noticed that the teenager seemed rather happy to be placed with 1A's teacher. Not that he was judging. Aizawa was a really great option for Hitoshi to improve himself, seeing as how the Erasure hero had a similar emitter type. "Aizawa is the perfect sensei for you, but I'd rather not have to explain it. You'll figure it out soon enough." Naruto lazily sat his blonde locks against the window behind him. Shinso grumbled in annoyance, "Whatever, it's not like I was going to ask you anyway. Still, you should make sure not to blow your internship either, lazy ass." The masked blonde nodded boringly, causing the purple-haired teenager to scoff playfully. The brainwashing quirk user strolled off slowly, his footsteps clacking against the tile floor, distancing himself as the seconds went by. Naruto got up creakingly from his sitting position and walked to the room he hadn't visited since his first meeting with UA's principal. As he opened the large wooden door, Niza sat taller with a teacup and reference sheets sprawled across his desk. "Ah, Naruto-kun, it's good to see you. How are you doing?" the mouse dog bear cheerfully asked. "Fine, Niza-sama. It's nice to see you again." The masked blonde bowed sincerely towards the small principal of UA. The white creature chuckled heartily, stirring his teaspoon in his cup. "The sports festival went well, don't you think so?" Niza's sadistic started to stir his animal instincts, as he smirked slyly. "Yes, I completed my task as planned, never revealing my true quirk as you asked. All Might's intervention was unexpected, but not unwelcome. I was to get Japan's encouragement willingly, but All Might seemed to ease my efforts proficiently." The half-lidded blue eyes answered emotionlessly. "Indeed, you have done better than I could have hoped for, and today's internship choice has reflected proudly on that success. I must say, I am intrigued to hear which route you will be heading." Niza motioned to the open seat in front of his desk. On the edge of the table was the document needed to sign one's permission to attend a hero agency. Naruto hadn't the need to analyze all his offers, seeing as how he had already picked a top 5. "I will get started right away then. I have picked 5 top 10 heroes to learn under. Not in any order as of this moment." The mouse dog bear nodded, getting the masked blonde to continue. "My first choice is Sir Night's agency. He developed Mirio Togata, and as such, I believe he can help me shape into a perfect combatist. Secondly, Yorai Mush's agency. His experience and veteran standards would enable me to question for more insight on the hero's society functionality and practicality. My third choice is Mirko's agency. Her combat abilities are second to none amongst females in the hero world. That being said, her strengths in speed and power would suit my quirk very well. My fourth choice is Hawk's agency. I have been compared to Hawks more than a few times. Many believed us to be brothers. His personality and outlook on heroes and life as a whole reflect strongly with my own. This gives me not only connections to a possible future number 1 hero, but also the shadowing of a great combatist and intelligent strategist. Lastly, Endeavor was my final pick for an internship. Endeavor is second only to All Might in strength, but he's a more all-rounded hero as a whole. Raw force exponentially conjoined with technical skill offers me a chance to improve and master my repertoire." The blonde explained with brief detail for each of his draft choices. "Yes, I have to agree, you have done well, Uzumaki-kun. If possible, I'd like you to narrow it down to 3 heroes. Of those 3, you should choose the most compatible and theoretically adaptive to yourself." Naruto mused easily enough in his head. He was already sure of his top choice, but indulging in second choices in case the agency he was interning for dropped him unexpectedly. Of course, of those original 5, I chose Mirko, Hawks, and Endeavor. While Mirko is extremely capable and powerful, her personality conflicts with my own, leaving her to be my third preference. Endeavor is a man who strictly abides by the system and stays stagnant in his ways of reaching obtrusively for the number 1 hero position. Although my respect for Endeavor is fairly high, my ideals don't reflect majorly with him, therefore, I believe Hawks to be my best choice. There is little to constrict my time as an intern if I'm under Hawks' command. I feel the most strongly about working with him, but if my offer falls through, Endeavor will be my second choice. Naruto preemptively summarized cleanly. Niza confirmed the choice, already smiling at the choice, thinking it to be best for the stoic boy. The Yui principal grinned happily at his new hero course student. That is a fine pick. Uzumaki-kun, Hawks, while unorthodox, still represents the greatness of rising generations. For the hero you're trying to be, Hawks is the best nomination I'd recommend, he said, folding his hands around his teacup. Now, if you sign here, and here, then you should be all set. Naruto nodded, picking up the pen placed in front of him. A precise signature smoothly enraptured the document. Naruto Uzumaki was officially interning at the Hawks Agency. Hawks Agency. Kigo sat napping lightly behind his desk. His yellow-coated pants were kicked up on the ledge, leaving the red-winged hero to breathe deeply, annoyingly. A knock to his office door alerted the preoccupied hero to either Ami, his secretary, or one of his sidekicks coming to finish a report. I apologize for disrupting you, Takami-sama, but I was just on the phone with UA's principal. Hawk cinched up in his comfortable office chair, obviously intrigued. I bring good news. Naruto Uzumaki will be an intern here next week. Endeavor and Mirko were his other top choices. But Niza said he respected Hawks the most. The beautiful blue-haired woman reported with a smile. Hawks nodded, a small smirk plastered on his features. Respected me over Endeavor. Oh man. The big guy would never stand for that. Hawks comically imagined the reaction of the number 2 hero. That is great news, Ami. Well, let's show Naruto Uzumaki how one of the top agencies operates. Takami turned to his secretary stoically, but his longtime secretary knew that her boss was enthralled. Kigo-sama really wanted Naruto Uzumaki. Getting him to intern and flatter his ego was enough to excite the otherwise bored hero. A group of men dressed in uniform suits and ties sat around a circular crestwood table, all fitted with computers and wires alike. Hawks landed Uzumaki from UA. He himself stated his profound interest in the boy. So, how do we proceed? One of the cumbersome workers had his fingers interlaced. I see it as a perfect opportunity for our number 3 hero to introduce his newest intern. I'm sure all of us here were interested in Uzumaki's performance in UA's festival. Seeing the nods of his fellow colleagues, the man continued, Hawks is a perfect enforcer. His diligence and altruism in the face of danger and other rudimentary obituaries makes him a stellar all-rounder. Uzumaki is much different, but I do believe he fills a role we've been missing for quite a while, one that needs to be filled again, and quickly. The vice advisor spoke, getting reluctant nods from the others of the commission. Another businessman looked critically disturbed. You can't be serious? Do I have to remind you all of the subject we created the last time such a role was befitted to a sole person? Our president was killed. We've already abolished such barbaric ways to protect our heroes and the public's safety. The man stood up, extending his arms outward in a placating motion. Yes, that is true, but we can already skip the precursors that were instated with our previous enforcer. Naruto Uzumaki is strong, calculative, intelligent to the core, and most of all, merciless. The boy is a perfect hero student to groom for such a position. You cannot disagree with the facts. Whether you want to believe it or not, one day, Japan will need a hero like her again. The vice advisor raised his voice slightly at his fellow committee personnel. The men collectively nodded in agreement. I see where you would be hesitant, but I assure you that we will do right with a second chance, the man said respectively, drawing many to adhere to his tone. Tell Hawks to bring him around tomorrow at 2:30. I'd like to get to see Naruto Uzumaki in person, the chairman of the board informed his awaiting assistant. First day of internship. Naruto gazed upwardly at the Fukuoka building. The Hawks Agency was one of the best in all of Japan, even though it was only started a few years ago by the once 18-year-old hero. The building wasn't overly large or boastful in any manner, but it did have that professionally constructive build. It was his first day of his internship that would last throughout the week, Shadowing one of the top 3 heroes was an honor restricted to only the best of hero candidates going through the Japan Hero system. Fukuoka was very difficult to commute to, seeing as how the agency was in the southern part of Japan. Not that he would complain about staying the week with Hawks. The 22-year-old was, without a doubt, the best choice for his internship. His skill in espionage was unmatched amongst the top heroes. Compiled with his high intelligence, Hawks truly was a hero that Naruto could learn many things from, regardless of specialization. He still needed to have the all-rounder skill set for his dream to become a reality. Unfortunately, his time with the winged hero would be short, so he would have to soak in all the information he could get. Stepping into the building, Naruto saw a woman waiting for him. She held a sign with his name on it, printed orderly with UA's symbol next to it. He lazily strolled towards the blue-haired woman with his hands in his pockets, carefully glancing at his surroundings. Seeing his familiar face, the beautiful, but professionally coded woman waved curtly. "Ah, you must be Uzumaki-san. My name is Ami Fukato, Hawks-sama's personal secretary. Please follow me. I'll lead you to him." She politely bowed to him, leaving him to nod in acknowledgement. It seemed she was slightly off-put by his stoic demeanor. Or was she somehow comparing him to someone? With a short nod, Naruto and Ami entered an elevator not far from where she had introduced herself. "Hawks-sama is located on the top floor. We will stop at the development department to get situated with an ID badge, as well as other material you will need for your internship." She pressed on a metal button labeled with an 11. Naruto saw that there were 30 floors in total, meaning the winged hero was probably on the highest one. Finally coming to a stop after a fairly brief escalation, the 2 occupants entered the 11th floor. A slightly narrow hallway opened up to a large facility that was difficult to view from the identification station placed in front of them. Scanning her hand, Ami motioned for him to follow. Walking through the small stations of people silently working on blueprint projects on 3D tablets and computers, the blue-haired woman stopped at a desk cleanly sprouted with identification papers already written with his name over them. "We have already gained access to your personal information through UA, therefore, we do not need you to participate in any legal obituaries, so, along with your ID, we will have to fit you with a retinal and fingerprint identification needed for accessing certain floors of the Hawks agency," she said with her hand pointed towards the office chair sat parallel to the desk. This process was definitely what he expected of a top hero agency. But everything was so organized and professionalized that it was hard to imagine Hawks managed this place entirely. A few minutes later, leading him back to the elevator, Ami pressed the 30th floor button. Both had to go through a minor process with the retinal and print scan to access Hawks' personal office, which was a very interesting experience in itself for Naruto. "I didn't take Hawks to be so enthusiastic with security measures. I must have miscalculated his character." The masked blonde spoke for the first time, causing gray eyes to focus upon his form. The secretary giggled slightly into her hand. "Well, that is because he isn't. Hawks-sama is confident in his ability to combat any that may infiltrate his agency. But he's not arrogant. It's mainly for the safety of his employees. That is why he hired me," she said with a prideful smile. Naruto quirked an eyebrow at that. "Oh, I see. Your quirk specializes in security," he summarized, slightly arriving to a speculation after seeing her stare intently at his scans. She nodded her head somewhat. "My quirk is USB, basically. I can access any database from remote locations within a certain area. Originally, I was hired as a sidekick, but now, Hawks-sama has me fitted into both assistant and sidekick roles." Ami vocalized her quirk proudly. It seemed she took great pride in her job. The elevator bell alerted both to their destination. As the metal doors slid open, Naruto was greeted with an open layout, littered with humble decorum. Sitting behind a dark oak desk was the number 3 hero, Hawks. The red-winged hero had his boots kicked up on the desk as he peeked open a gold orb. Ami's heels clicked to the side of his desk as the two closed in upon the pro-hero. "I apologize for making you wait. Hawks-sama, I have entered him into the system as you asked, and believe he is ready for instruction." She handed the blonde hero a file that he took with an arm untucked from behind his head. "Thank you, Ami. I won't be too long." He sat up a tad straighter in his mahogany chair, getting the hero to turn expressionless eyes upon Naruto. The blue-haired woman bowed before leaving the way they came. Upon seeing the doors of the elevator close, Hawks opened the manila folder his secretary handed him. "There's a few things I just wanted to get out of the way. I'm not really up for all the formalities, so, Naruto Uzumaki, I don't really care what you call me, just be respectful about it, I guess. He looked down at a picture of a younger Naruto without a mask. It says your quirk is teleportation. I'm not sure how accurate that is, but I'm not going to interrogate you about it or anything. It'd be nice to know what I'm working with though. Naruto raised an eyebrow. Nobody had questioned his quirk before. He had always made sure to have his abilities tied under a singular term. Knowing his quirk was much more in-depth, Kigo placed his head on his palm held up by the surface. I'm not really interested in teaching or anything, but talent such as yours is hard to pass up on. With your quirk, you could specialize in almost anything, and I felt interested enough to give you some experience. Plus, I don't want to spend extra time coddling a teenager who doesn't know the ropes. Thankfully, with your previous status, we can skip over multiple steps, which in return gives us more free time. Hawks wafted his hand in a generalizing motion. The 22-year-old obviously didn't want to waste time on somebody who needed a lot of sculpting in the hero ways. The winged hero stood from his desk, finally giving Naruto a much clearer view of his form. Kigo was a man of average height with a slim and narrow build. He has feathery ash blonde hair swept messily backward with some of the front tufts sticking up in arcs above his head, notably thick eyelashes, and some faint stubble on his chin. His hero outfit was composed of a black shirt with a wavy golden pattern like a ripple in a pond. Over this, he had a tan jacket with a high collar, the insides and cuffs of the sleeves lined with white fur, and black gloves. UV glasses were positioned over his eyes, giving him protection when flying at high speeds and altitudes. Kigo had his hands in his pockets, much like the boy across the room. That being said, you'll have a lot more hands-on experience, though without your provisional license. I'm basically limited to babysitting duties. You're already stronger than the other students of your age, so I'll have you spar with me or a certain person that is in town. You should get used to fighting higher-level opponents, which you'll have at the provisional license exam. I'm not much of a power fighter like Endeavor or All Might, but I'm still ranked 3rd for a reason. However, the other person, well, I'll save that for when the time comes, Hawks concluded as he began to walk towards the window. The winged hero paused, turning around to face his intern. Got any questions? Naruto shook his head, causing Kigo to open the window of his office. Let's go right, you can't fly. I almost did that out of habit, he chuckled dryly, rubbing the back of his head. Hawks-sama, I have the ability to fly as well. Takami's eyes widened fractionally after Naruto's declaration. Oh, how does that work? Hawks blandly replied, trying to hide his surprise and delight. Getting Uzumaki as an intern was now 10 times better. The masked blonde's body began to levitate a foot off the floor. I can basically fly at high speeds in air for an extended period of time. It becomes taxing after a few hours from my previous experiences. Naruto's hands were still comically stuck to his pockets. Gojo's flight ability. Kigo simply nodded. What can't this kid do? Oh well, at least I can take to the skies. The feathery blonde-haired hero laughed. Well, this internship just became a lot easier. Anything else I should know about? No, Hawks-sama, the blue-eyed Uzumaki said stoically. The red-winger hero perched on the windowsill. We're going to patrol the west side of Fukuoka today. You have my authorization to enact if you deem anything dangerous to the civilian population. Now, let's get going. Kigo leapt calmly, getting the blonde to shuffle out to the same window. I haven't flown in a while, Naruto thought before dripping off the same sill, trailing after the flapping red wings of Hawks. Back inside his office, Ami re-entered. Hawks-sama, the HPSC wanted to meet Uzumaki-san at 2:30 tomorrow. Does he have his hero costume? Hawks-sama? The beautiful secretary looked confusingly at the empty office. She gained a tick mark at knowing Takami-sama skipped the 2-hour internship introductory period. Stomping over to the opened window directly behind her boss's desk, the blue-haired sidekick looked shockingly at Uzumaki flying without the assistance of Hawks. Scrambling to take out her phone, Ami snapped a picture of the two for their social media. Hawks-sama is probably super happy someone is able to fly with him, especially an intern that usually needs to be led through the hero process. She smiled brilliantly, making sure to keep the window slightly open for them to re-enter. Later, Hawks and Naruto entered a small cafe on the southwest side of Fukuoka. The number 3 hero had told the masked blonde of this joint, also making sure that they were secluded enough from the public in order to enjoy a proper meal. A waitress came up to their table, taking their orders stutteringly, obviously not expecting Hawks to make an appearance. Confusingly to Naruto, Kigo always indulged his fans whenever they stopped him to ask for an autograph or a picture. The winged hero was probably just doing it for appearances, because it looked like he almost did it routinely without hesitation. Although the stoppage caused by fans and reporters happened a couple times, their morning patrol was pretty uneventful. The crime in Fukuoka was predominantly low compared to larger cities such as Tokyo or Yokohama, which overall in itself was pretty surprising considering Fukuoka was one of the largest cities in Japan. It seemed hawks had a large following here, and most, if not all, saw the misfortune in starting crime rings and yakuza activities in a city with a top 3 hero who specializes in subterfuge. Kigo noticed the aimless look of thought on his intern's face. Patrolling is pretty tedious, huh? I usually leave the petty criminal routine to my sidekicks. I usually get pretty large gigs frequently, so I don't have the time to diffuse day-to-day theft every day. Which reminds me, the HPSC wants to meet you. The red-winged hero boringly stirred the drink in his hand. Naruto raised an eyebrow. The Hero Public Safety Commission. What for? He asked curiously. The slight raise in his voice was not lost on Kigo. Couldn't say. I work pretty diligently with the HPSC for undercover assignments and such. Just speaking from experience. It's probably a silent invitation of interest, Hawk said, knowing this was exactly the way Kigo began training with the HPSC as a child. The masked blonde lazily blinked at the man. Wait, you work with the HPSC? Naruto asked monotonously, getting a nod in return. Takami set his drink down on the dark table in front of him. Yeah, ever since I became a pro-hero. Just some things here and there, he emotionlessly uttered. The HPSC was something he didn't want to talk about all the time. They had ruled a large part of his life already. Trying to divert the conversation, the blonde hero pointed his finger at the UA festival winner. By the way, where's your hero outfit? You can't be wearing a school blazer to an internship. Not that I really care for regulations and whatnot. But doesn't UA work with production companies? He asked subtly, causing the blonde UA student to glance puzzlingly at him. I was Gen Ed until a few days ago, so I never had anything prepared for it. But UA said it would be delivered to your office tomorrow. Kigo nodded in acknowledgement, slightly thankful for Naruto dismissing the HPSC topic. Much like his own outfit, Hawks assumed the blue-eyed teenager would wear something practical in accordance with his quirk. That's good. Hopefully it isn't too showy like All Might. Kids have a tendency to go over the top these days. He chuckled before speaking again. You use any special gadgets with your quirk? Takami peeked over his drink, through his visor, at Naruto. No, I've become pretty formidable with a ninjato though. I'm not sure if that is a conjunction or hero weapon classification. My close-range combat would only improve with the addition of a sword style. Naruto took a sip of his own drink, gazing at the reaction of his superior. Of course, getting a read on someone who held extremely impressive control over their emotions was increasingly difficult. The red-winged hero placed his head onto his palm. Kenjutsu, huh? Excessive damage, even to villains, with weapons like that are pretty frowned upon. It doesn't bother me. But I'd say to only use it against more attributed opponents. Your quirk combined with your hand-to-hand combat is already damaging in itself. He turned his golden eyes upon the nodding boy. It seemed he came to the same conclusion. In all, it only led Kigo to his next question. That being said, you are a suitable combat type. Endeavor is stronger than me in a straight fight. But you chose my agency instead. Why? He asked curiously, not seeking flattery in any way. He could have added how Nizu admitted to Uzumaki saying he respected him more than Endeavor. But that would sound like he wanted his ego stroked. You are considered a tactical genius in the art of deception and infiltration. For what I want to accomplish, those skills need to be polished thoroughly, in my opinion. A smarter opponent will always beat a stronger one. I don't just want to thrash my opposition. I want to outwit them while thinking multiple steps ahead. It sounds cliché, I know, but it is how I would want to walk into battle. That is why I picked your agency over Endeavor. Not because he lacks those things. But I just think you're better at those specific elements, Naruto said stoically, much like an emotionless soldier, but stern conviction betrayed his tone. Kigo stared with half-lidded eyes for a few seconds. Wow, that's kind of along the lines of my suspicions, but better than Endeavor? Yeah, I'd rather you not say something like that near him unless you want to fight a 6 feet 5 inches tank on my behalf. He humorlessly laughed as Naruto tilted his head in confusion. Anyways, I wouldn't call myself the best, but I'm pretty good at sabotage and the sorts. The speciality is hard to learn when faced with the endless possibilities of quirks that defend against infiltration. However, the hardest skill of all to master is your emotions, bar none. In your case, you already have an impressive hold over your emotional output, but you lack experience, as I said earlier at the office. That's something easily fixed with time, so just be laid back and chill. Plus, that was pretty cliché, Kigo teased half-heartedly, receiving a sweat drop from the masked blonde. Coming from around their booth, the meats they had ordered were being carried by their waitress. Finally, I'm starving. Hawks sat back in the seat as the food began to be placed in front of him and Naruto. 2 sets of chopsticks broke apart, leaving the two to grill their meat on their respective conro. A comfortable silence reigned as the respective hero and in turn casually ate, even with people waiting outside the restaurant. Hawks really had a lot of fans, though for some reason, many of them were teenage girls. End of first day. After their sizable lunch, Naruto and Hawks patrolled for a couple more hours, which led to a time the winger hero labeled as nap time. At the time, the masked blonde thought his boss freed time on his schedule to rest in his office by doing paperwork, but he actually slept. Not that it bothered him. If anything, it was a tad satisfying to accustom free time into his daily routine. Sometimes it really was nice to just lay back and watch the clouds drift by while listening to the many sounds that enraptured one's senses. So, without a second thought, Naruto joined his boss in some shut-eye, much to the ire of Takami-sama's secretary. An hour or so after said period of time, Hawks had Naruto spar his sidekicks, trying to depict any openings in his battle technique. However, the challenge was about the same as fighting Todoroki or Bakugo, leaving the blonde to inadvertently damage some egos of the Hawks agency. Expectantly, Kigo had found nothing to critique his UA intern on, while simultaneously patting himself on the back for landing an intern who didn't need fixing in the combat aspects. He had planned for, if they had time after dealing with the HPSC, he would probably bring in a former pro hero that was interested in giving Naruto a higher skilled opponent. It was evident that weaker competition would never show the holes Uzumaki could possibly have in combat. This also left him questioning the boy's IQ. He himself was pretty intelligent, but the blue-eyed boy was definitely on a level of his own. Multiple times in his spars, Kigo observed Naruto predict his sidekick's moves like they were fodder. It was almost as if the blonde knew what the combatant would do before they even made a move themselves. Therefore, he was pretty alcimated to pull the stoic UA student to the side and shove his masked face into an IQ test just to sedate his curiosity, which led to where they were at now. Ami had given the boy his ID card, as well as his official recommendation for the HPSC invitational meeting tomorrow. Prepare yourself for the HPSC. We'll meet here first and hopefully your costume will be available. I have someone coming in on Wednesday to spar with you, and they will definitely give you a harder time than my sidekicks. Now go home. I'm tired, Hawks yawned, waving the boy off in a careless tone. The masked blonde bowed lazily. Getting an amused snicker out of the number 3 hero, Naruto retreated to the elevator, pressing the ground level. Overall, it was a pretty uneventful day. There wasn't much conflict with criminal activity considering Kyushu was mellow according to Hawks. Fans were an aspect that he wasn't very used to. Most of the time he was outright ignoring the girlish yelps of civilians asking for the tan-jacketed pro hero to look their way. For someone so attuned to ignoring such praise, the winged hero actually indulged a few people in their small requests. A few had recognized him from the UA Sports Festival, and immediately asked him for pictures or autographs. It was quite embarrassing for Naruto as he politely declined all people who approached him. Hawks had mentioned briefly about upholding an image, or basically granting a few requests a day in order to satisfy the pro-hero enthusiasts. Kigo didn't really care for the whole act, but he did it anyway because even the angered Endeavor stopped for autographs once in a while. As his thoughts concluded with the opening of the elevator doors, Ami sat behind a desk adjacent to his position. Good night, Uzumaki-kun. I should have your hero costume present before your meeting tomorrow. Before you go, sign out with the ID tag on this kiosk right here. The blue-haired woman pointed to the small tablet punctured to the marble countertop, with the green mark of acceptance shown upon the screen. Naruto pocketed his ID into his black travel bag that was strung over his left shoulder. Good night, Fukato-san, he replied stoically. With a short courteous wave, Naruto began walking towards the inn he would be spending the week in. It wasn't practical for him to commute such a distance every day, especially since he didn't want fatigue to interfere with his internship. Later, downtown Fukuoka. It was about 6:30, so Naruto headed to a convenience store for something to calm his stomach. He had eaten a fairly large meal earlier in the day, yet he still felt some desire for a cool meal. Do I know you from somewhere? A stoically low voice sounded to Naruto's right as he passed an alley. The masked blonde stopped, lazily facing the voice as he did so. Maybe. The oceanic orb teenager spoke into the eerie dark. The moon was blockaded by the building behind the figure, leaving only the figure's clothes to be viewed. A jet black jacket was draped over a V-neck white shirt, complementing the white-shouldered stitch pattern. A matching pair of jeans held together by a dark belt, laid loosely on the presumably male stature. Combat boots were strapped at mid-calf length, giving the figure an intimidating stature. I remember now. Wow, what an honor it is to meet the UA Festival winner, the person said without a convincing tone one would expect with such a saying. Naruto kept his hands in his pockets, however. He was expecting the figure to do something drastic. The honor is all mine, the masked blonde spoke emotionlessly. The form humorlessly chuckled at his shortened reply. You don't seem very enthusiastic about it, but that's explanatory given your past and all. Naruto was met with a head of spiky black hair and a plot of purple stitches on the man's skin, from what the blonde could observe. These dried blotches of skin were formed around the underside of his mouth down to his neck, and around his eyes and forearms. A bemused smile on the figure's face concluded his senses of the seemingly dangerous person in front of him. I'm not around Fukuoka that much, but I overheard some excited girls earlier today going on about Hawks and the UA tournament winner patrolling. You were pretty much all over the place on social media and whatnot, I have to say. Hearing about a kid changing from opposite sides of the society spectrum surprised me. Looking at you now, I can't even see the usual boisterous upholding citizen you'd see in hero students. If you don't mind me asking, how are you liking it so far? The masked Uzumaki couldn't help but frown. This guy's acting skills betrayed his true intentions. The black-haired man didn't really care about the know-how of hero students. No. The way he was talking made it sound more like he was measuring Naruto's intentions. It's fine. As for acting differently from others my age, I just value different things. The UA first year responded to the question with a vague answer. That's good I suppose. Heroes with the same mindset do get pretty bland. What makes you different then? The turquoise-eyed man raised a curious brow towards the slightly taller teenager. What makes me different? Well, like you said, I've seen both sides of the society spectrum. There isn't much more to say, the blue-eyed teenager retorted. Naruto wasn't trying to share his views with an absolute stranger that appeared out of an alley. Did this guy really think he just obliged absently? The chiseled man nodded as one hand slithered into his pocket. That is true. You probably have a better life perspective than most if not all of the other students your age. Plus you're pretty strong, which means your opinion holds more value. You trying to prove a point to heroes and villains or something? He asked stoically. Maybe, maybe not, the boy replied monotonously. If the man was disappointed by the answer, he didn't show it. Instead, he looked the Uzumaki up and down before leaning on the brick wall next to him. Not very forthcoming with personal matters, huh? Not all of us like telling our life story, I respect that. Well, I didn't mean to take up your time. Someone as important as you probably has somewhere to be. The black-clothed adult bobbed his head half-heartedly in an apologetic manner. Naruto accepted the unmistaken false man apology with a barely noticeable nod. This man didn't seem the least bit interested in his life story. No, he was searching for some kind of clarification. But why him? Naruto was one of many UA students, so what was so special about him? I'll be on my way. I can't wait to see your future endeavors, Naruto Uzumaki. I'll be watching closely, the man whispered into the slight breeze as he walked away, carrying the chilling message through the air. The oceanic orb teenager watched the back of the adult man disappear into the shadows. There was no doubt in his mind that this man was some sort of criminal or perhaps even a villain. In all honesty, Naruto was expecting the man to attack him, but an attack never came. So did something he said satisfy the man? He'd have to be careful the next time he met someone like that. Naruto hadn't forgotten that he would be targeted by villains for just being a UA student, yet he'd be careful to never lower his guard. Not like he's lowered his artificial mental and physical barriers he's enacted on himself all his life anyway. It was no different than before. The blonde continued on his leisurely stroll as if nothing happened. Meat buns did sound good right now. Hopefully no dodgy characters would interrupt his quiet enjoyment of silence via alleyway. From now on, Day 2 of internship. Ah, good morning, Uzumaki-kun. I hope you slept well, Ami greeted the masked blonde as he entered the Hawks agency in Kyushu. Since he ended late the day before, Hawks had him show up at 10 o'clock to do some minor patrolling whilst simultaneously breaking in his hero costume. They were to visit the HPSC later in the day where he would essentially interview with the Hero Commission. Kigo had suggested he freshen up on his infiltration skills, seeing as how the HPSC's likeliness to question his skill may surface. Unbeknownst to her, Naruto had a breakfast tray in his hands, which was obscured by the marble countertop in front of her. I'm fine, thank you, Fukato-san. I had read online that it was respectful to bring your host breakfast for being hospitable, so I had brought a small meal for you and Hawks-sama if that is okay. The masked blonde laid the tray with a traditional Japanese lineup of fish, rice, and miso soup with a boiled egg off to the side. A small cup of coffee was sat next to the tray, causing the female sidekick to look confusingly at his display. I wasn't sure how you or Hawks-sama liked your coffee, so I have these as well. The UA student unpackaged a casing of sugar and sweetener in 3 different flavors. In all honesty, he never really had connections with anyone, and he wanted to do right here. Hopping around from orphanage to orphanage, Naruto had been alone most of his life. He couldn't help but try not to feel lonely now. Hawks seemed respectable, even if he had only been here a day, so maybe he could start with the number 3 hero. The blue-haired woman's pupils expanded into hearts as he broke out into a fit of giggles. Aren't you the sweetest? Kaya! She reached out and stretched his cheeks with his red nail-polished fingers. Many of Hawk's other sidekicks looked appalled by the normally serious woman laughing in appreciation. Supposedly she was a sucker for chivalrous acts. You're welcome? The boy gripped her wrist, trying to remove the woman from his face, but to no avail. The masked blonde's face scrunched up in discomfort. Seriously. I almost spent 3,000 yen for this, Sundara. Troublesome, he sighed in defeat, letting the woman do as she wished. The Hawks agency continued on with their days as Ami started to happily eat the food Hawks in turn bought for them. The giddy woman scrunched her fists onto the chopsticks, forcefully protruding them in front of the blonde Uzumaki's face. She had something along the lines of, "Feed me, Naruto-kun," but none were too close to hear. Thankfully, coming from the elevator to the female sidekick's left was his savior in all of his winged glory. Oh, something smells good. Oh, am I interrupting something? The golden-eyed pro-hero's eyebrows furrowed, seeing his secretary shoot up straight as if nothing happened. Looking over the desk at Naruto, he could tell the boy was trying to hide his uncomfortability under a lazy facade. Ami cleared her throat, while also reaching under her desk to pull out a briefcase with the number 21 on it in bold green. Of course not, Hawks-sama. I was just about to give Uzumaki-san his hero outfit. Oh. He brought breakfast for us as well. The tan, slender woman motioned towards the 2 trays of food steaming in anticipation as she tried to take the attention off her. Hawks gave her a pointed look of boredom. It was amusing to him seeing Ami cover up her giddiness so quickly. Right? Breakfast does sound good. Thanks, little guy. He picked up a set of chopsticks, choosing to pick after the grilled fish on the platter. About the costume. Damn, I was hungry. Go put it on. I'll meet you in my office before we go out for the day, Kigo said to the masked blonde before turning to the blue-haired woman, avoiding eye contact. Eating mannerly. A few minutes later, Naruto stepped off the elevator upon reaching Hawk's office. His new outfit felt genuinely secure to his body, making it as if he had been wearing the suit for a while now. It just so happened that he was a bit excited to wear his hero costume out for the patrol. It was pretty badass. Looking at his reflection for a moment, the masked blonde admired his simple but practical design. His upper body was fitted with a compression shirt, made to include his mask in its usual threshold, and was accompanied by a sleeveless design. Strapped over his chest was a gray Kelver vest fit with straps that were connected to his collarbone. Forearm sleeves were configured like his compression shirt, leaving the accessory to reach just below his bicep while being kept down with 2 parallel lines of white electrical tape. Over these sleeves were metallic plates meant for deflection and absorption of kinetic energy released from physical applications. The UA student also included black gloves that were snug but rid of any uncomfortability, making the cool-resistant material ideal for kenjutsu and combat. His lengthy legs were loosely fit with flexible but strong material which would help reduce physical damage to his legs upon shrapnel or projectile weapons. Tied around his right thigh was a weapons pouch preordained to the inclusion of weapons and devices he may need in the field. Black medical tape was gripped around his pant legs, making sure that they wouldn't interfere with any of his movements, not wanting to use anything heavy or too mundane. Naruto had requested for thin but durable combat boots that were usually distributed in special military units. On his back, the masked blonde carried a ninjato in a small but situational sheath, used for easy access and lock-in mechanisms. The ninjato itself was as simple as his costume, but the hamon edge was charcoal black, giving the sword a matte textured look. The last part was his hardest decision for his uniform. He had wanted to wear a helmet of some kind, and had really liked a decision he had constructed for himself. But he ultimately found that he liked practicality over looks. Taskmaster's helmet. That being said, Naruto ended with a dog-themed mask, easily configured to the confines of his face, which was made to click into place and stay stagnant during vigorous movement. Kakashi Umbu mask. Overall, he was extremely satisfied with his choice. This design was perfect for his hero identity, whilst both being aerodynamic and stealth-influenced. The mask helped shade his eyes and rid his face of any expressions, knowing no one would be able to read his emotions with it on. Sheesh, nice fit. The voice of his boss sounded from the interior of the office. Leaning against the oak desk with his arms crossed, Kigo smirked at his intern entering like a soldier. The assassin-looking outfit fit the boy very well, almost to the point where he was jealous. The winged hero loved his own hero suit, but wearing the same thing since his debut made things pretty stale. Though Naruto's face was ridden of a reaction, an appreciative nod was easily visible. I have to ask though, what's with the mask? You aren't hideous or anything, so what's with the added blockage? The blonde pro-hero asked curiously as he titled his head to the side presumably. Naruto seemed to be in thought as silence reigned briefly. Well, I guess I would feel naked without something covering at least a part of my face. Should I take it off? The ANBU masked blonde shrugged before replying with his own question. The golden-visored hero shook his head slowly. Nah, everybody has their own tendencies and I'm no different. Plus, for the image you're trying to create, being faceless during hero work would be ideal in the dark lighting of the hero world. And, you know, the whole gentleman act you worked with Ami compiled with the mysteriousness of your outfit. Women are going to fight over you. Kigo laughed at the noticeable tinge in the blonde's shoulders, causing the boy to try to act uncaringly as he lazily reached for his pockets. Of course his costume had pockets. If he was being serious, Naruto actually was getting some attention from a few girls back at the UA festival, though he doubted the socially dense hero student knew that. Plus, the entire thing with his secretary, yeah, he had only seen that side from Ami a couple times, yet Uzumaki was able to break that serious woman at the hinges. Were interns supposed to be this great? We only have about an hour before we have to head for Oita Prefecture. The HPSC will probably take a couple hours at most, so no worries. Anyways, let's get going. We'll be patrolling downtown today. Hawks cleanly summarized their day minimally. It was obvious he wasn't too keen on the drawn-out obituaries of hero work. Just like the day before, the blonde duo free fell from the top-floor office window, leaving many civilians awestruck at the flying pair. HPSC. A couple hours later, Naruto and Hawks had another uneventful patrol, where most of the time was spent soaring over the city skyline. One of their largest obstacles in day-to-day hero work was the fangirls that seemed to roam around Fukuoka. It was obvious to the red-winged heroes in turn that he was fairly annoyed by the constant girlish screams sent in his direction. It eventually became time for them to leave in order to make their meeting time for 2:30. Originally, the masked blonde had offered to teleport the two of them to Oita without the need for public transportation, but Hawks considered it needless quirk usage. Of course, Naruto agreed with him. However, he felt the need to display all options for his boss to choose from. The blue-eyed Uzumaki was trying his best to be useful to his superior, even for minuscule tasks as easy as transporting someone. Ultimately, the two set out for the HPSC without any problems, leaving them to arrive a few minutes early. Upon walking closer to the building, Naruto could depict a diamond design displayed about 3/4 of the total height. The commission building was nothing to awe at, but it held its professionalism quite well. The cubicle structure was similar to most buildings in the area. However, the HPSC office held a certain air that came with being an important corporation within Japan. They were greeted by some suited men, who were easily identifiable as security, and a woman dressed plainly in usual business garb for someone of her stature. The average-looking woman guided them towards the commission hall that held their highest officials, although, The blonde hero and student were told of their president's absence, seeing as how she had a meeting with the Japanese government. Finally reaching a typical conference room labeled as M1, Hawks and Naruto observed a round table fitted with computers and bland-looking businessmen and women. "Welcome Hawks-san, Uzumaki-san. Sorry for contacting you on such short notice, but we couldn't pass up the chance to see a promising future hero under your wing, Hawks-san." The goateed hero noticed the dry voice of the chairman standing at the end of the table. "Neither could I. As you know, I have no interest in teaching at all. But this mini-me piqued my curiosity." The winged hero winked at the boy next to him who, to his somewhat jealousy, stood taller than him. The chairman walked closer to the duo with his hand extended. "Mini-me, huh? I could see that." Naruto stood in an identical stance to Hawks, which involved a lackadaisical stature. As he shook the masked blonde's hand, the chairman backed away and gave the boy a short bow. "It is an honor to meet someone of the next generation of heroes. You, Naruto Uzumaki, have really caught the attention of the HPSC." The man pushed his glasses higher up on his nose, leaving the UA student to bow in return. "Thank you, Chairman-san. May I ask why the HPSC is interested in me?" Naruto asked stoically, causing many of the older adults to cringe at the monotonous voice. The older man chuckled at the dog-masked figure. "Yes, of course. We feel you would have a great chance to fulfill a role left vacant for some time. But first, let's sit." The bony hand of the chairman pointed towards two vacant chairs at the end of the table. Hawks and Naruto sat next to each other, where the red-winged man relaxed slightly at not being the topic of conversation. "So, Naruto Uzumaki, age 15, height 5 feet 10 inches, weight 165, hair, blonde, eyes, blue, quirk, teleportation, orphan for 15 years, ex-villain for 3 years, self-trained and taught, student at UA Hero Academy, winner of the UA Sports Festival, and currently interning at the Hawks Agency. Hero name, unknown, skill level, unknown. Is our information accurate?" A woman to the left of the chairman's position read from her desktop before looking up for confirmation. The masked blonde nodded. "Yes, most of that is public knowledge, I think," he said evenly, his mask obstructing his facial reactions from being seen. Good, then there is no need to waste time filling out anything we've missed. But I must interject, I see you are wearing your hero costume. Therefore it is logical to assume you also have a hero name to accommodate?" The chairman interlocked his fingers, interested in the UA student's selected name. The blonde bobbed his head in confirmation. "Yes, it was a fairly simple element of my UA processing. Recently, one of my senseis had called me a nickname which I found amusing. So, I have gone with the hero name, Void." A hint of pride etched into his tone. The sensei he was talking of was Aizawa, who had originally confided in the hero name, Taskmaster, but President Mike had overheard their conversation and mentioned the name Void, because he always had control of the space around himself. Plus, the black-haired underground hero added the fact that his name fit well with his most powerful technique that he had yet to use on anyone. Furious taps were heard instantly as keyboards began blazing around the room. "Perfect, my boy, simply perfect. Menacing and mysterious, just like yourself." The chairman pointed his index finger while laughing. "Pretty simple as well, just like my own name. I gotta say though, you got a classification name like my winged hero?" The wavy blonde pro-hero curled an eyebrow at his in turn. Expectantly, the boy shrugged nonchalantly. "No, I didn't really see the need for one. Plus it would be too troublesome." Naruto sighed lazily as the HPSC members sent him confused glances. "I see. Well, now that your name is on record, we can finally get down to business," the chairman informed the two blondes. Around the conference room, the committee members began shuffling out manila folders labeled with a reclusive PR bolded in red. Naruto saw that Hawks was familiar with the folders, seeing his knowing gaze. Considering his boss went through the habituations in the HPSC before, the masked blonde doubted the process would be different, knowing they had interest in him. As they all opened to a certain section of the folder with very few files, the familiar head of hair and half-covered face greeted the UA student's eyesight. "I'm sure Hawks has already informed you of his involvement with the HPSC, seeing as how he gets most of his missions from the higher-ups at our establishment. That being said, we scout for talent to fulfill roles we call enforcers throughout the entirety of Japan. Anyone from hero student to sidekicks can be considered for these respective roles, but here at HPSC, we look for certain aspects that conduct well with our policies. Therefore, many of our constituents who witnessed the UA Sports Festival said, Uzumaki is no stranger to combat or manipulation, and I hereby quote, Uzumaki's opponents play into his hands thoroughly. It's as if his tactically keen mind runs rampant with expectancies. The man read aloud from a report in front of him, getting a nod from Hawks, knowing he came to the same conclusion. Peeking at the masked blonde's aloof expression, the HPSC chairman continued, of course, that was not all. A particularly well-known HPSC informative stated, Uzumaki is heads and shoulders above his competition. Without proper measurement, I'm afraid it is hard to rank his skill level. However, any pro hero outside of the top 10 would display increasing difficulty facing him right now. He continues saying, if I had to make estimates, using the hero evaluation manuscript, power is B, speed is B, technique is A, intelligence is S/S, and skillfulness is A. Although it is hard to scale without facing challenging opponents, Uzumaki was still holding back. I may be reaching, but Naruto Uzumaki is potentially hiding stronger and more versatile skills. But, with what I have seen, I can only rank what was shown to the UA spectators, and therefore, Uzumaki received a 4.75 out of 6 HPSC rating. This assessment was conducted by one of the few elite hero trainers the HPSC has to offer, one that was involved with Hawk's own development. Naruto glanced at Hawks as he saw the slightly disturbed look on his usually calm features. I'm not sure if you are familiar with our ranking system, but if we used Hawks here as an example, he'd be a 5.1 out of 6 ranking, or an S-ranked hero. You, Naruto Uzumaki, as our trainer concluded, are nearing the S-ranked border at only 15 years of age, so we at the HPSC want to make you an offer. The masked blonde leaned a little closer unconsciously. The chairman smirked at Hawks in turn. For the next 3 years, the Hero Public Safety Commission is willing to set you up with a better living environment than the one you're currently in. This includes recurring payments for such things as meals and tuition, but your work-study would have to be enrolled here under our professional hero trainers, of course. If Hawks also offered the work-study to you, then you would split your time in between his agency and here, you see, with your massive potential and skills to match. We'd like to groom you into the enforcer position by the time you'd graduate from UA, or if your heart is placed elsewhere, Shiketsu, Ketsubustu, or Isamu Academy. The man grinned happily, knowing the offer was hard to refuse. The blue-eyed Uzumaki frowned under his mask. Situations like this had happened before, more than he'd like to admit. Any sort of offer sent his way during his life always resulted in some ulterior motive, which he was more than used to at this point. It almost seemed as if they were trying to bribe him into a scenario that was more than the job description entailed. Yet he couldn't say he wasn't interested in such an opportunity nonetheless if they were so desperate for a hero student to fill this enforcer role that they'd offer to pay for his schooling and living fees. Then he'd have to use their sly undertone of desperation against them. The stoic UA student folded his fingers in his lap, making a diamond shape. That does sound very tempting. But what does this enforcer position entail? The newly named hero student, Void, questioned skeptically. An older woman with glasses and crow's feet resounding next to her eyes raised her voice. Our enforcers deal with threats we deem dangerous to Japanese civilians and heroes. For example, Hawks is attuned to infiltration, and as such, is dealt missions centering around retrieval and subterfuge. However, we are more interested in your, let's say, ruthless occupational nature, so you'd have a similar role to Hawks, but we believe your skills to be useful in targeting those deemed endangering civilian and hero lives, and by this, we mean finding said target, combating them quietly, and arresting and shipping them off to the police. A non-killing assassin of sorts. The mid-aged woman expertly described their process, causing the chairman to smile appreciatively at her. Closing his eyes in thought, Naruto summarized the benefits of said position. For the hero he wanted to be, the enforcer role they wanted him to fill was fitted canonically well to his ideals. But there were still too many unknowns being tied down to an organization that was sketchy and possibly leading him on with false perceptions. The masked blonde frowned. I see. So working in the shadows of hero society, it is very intriguing. But there are still many things to consider, and as such, what happened to the previous enforcer in this precarious position? Is this some kind of elaborate ruse meant to employ heroes for the underlying work of the HPSC? You see, I'd have to know what kind of work I'd be selling myself into before I make any hasty decisions. The emotionless blonde leveled out, causing many to sweat under their collars at the question about the previous enforcer. To his side, Hawks hummed in amusement, seeing his intern so blatantly call out one of the highest forms of commission in Japan was a sight in itself. Seriously, either Naruto had figured out the insatiable side of the HPSC or he just ultimately didn't want to take orders from others who didn't value the same ideals as he. However, even with the dealings the HPSC had incorporated in the past, which involved working beneath public knowledge, the winged hero presumed the commission and the UA student had two fairly different views on the unseen forces of hero society. I assure you, Uzumaki-san, that the enforcer position is exactly as we say. However, there are more in-depth job depictions we cannot release to someone uninvolved with our company. That includes the other enforcers and mission details. The chairman cleanly picked up for the woman to his left. Nonetheless, we understand your hesitancy, so rest assured, you have time to answer our call. Although, we'd appreciate your cooperation, which is why Hawks is here. You can ask him about this line of work since he's been working with the HPSC since his debut. The man smiled as Naruto faced Kigo with a raised brow. Of course, if you accept, all the insurances we promised within making the offer will be accounted for upon acceptance. The oceanic orb boy fiddled momentarily in his seat. Without context, the deal sounded upfront and overall quite generous, yet he couldn't help but get the same encroaching feeling of someone preying on his less than ideal living scenario. He would definitely have to think this over. The chairman grinned once more. Well, since we haven't come to a conclusive decision yet, you two are free to go. I was hoping that we'd be able to move into the furtherment of our relationship. But all is not lost, and I applaud you for thinking over your options. If anything, it shows that you continue to prove your adaptiveness to the enforcer role. The older man got up from his office chair with a practiced grunt, walking steadily to the seats of his visitors who rose in return. As he bowed to the hero and student, the man took out a business card from the pocket of his jacket. If you need anything from me, you call me at this number and ask for Daisuke Takahashi. Security will show you the way out. Even if Hawks already knows the way, the now identified Takahashi chuckled grovely. Thank you, Takahashi-san. Naruto bowed in return, leaving the red-winged hero to pat Daisuke on the shoulder familiarly. Hawks and the new named hero, Void, left with the security as they were escorted to the lobby. Seeing as how the meeting didn't run long and the masked blonde didn't take the HPSC's offer, there wasn't much else to do besides wait for Uzumaki's answer. If the UA student had accepted, then the meeting would have lasted longer, where he would have more than likely had a schedule planned for him. Overall, there wasn't much Hawks could say or do. Not that he wanted to sway his intern's opinions one way or another, but even he still hated the cynicism in which HPSC operated. Even if Naruto was a promising prospect, something still kept him skeptical about it all. He understood offering the UA student a position, but paying for his living fees and everyday expenses? He couldn't help but ponder what their true motivation actually was in gaining the hero student as an enforcer. Stepping back out into the cool breeze of the afternoon, Kigo extended his wings in preparation for flight. Well, that was certainly interesting. This is a choice you are going to have to make on your own. I know they expect me to guide you along, but I believe you should choose a route that benefits you the most. That's all I have to say. The golden-eyed hero swiftly crouched and sprang into flight, leaving the taller teenager to his own thoughts momentarily. On the ground below, the blue-eyed Uzumaki looked on lazily as he always did, even with his usual stoic form. A hint of tension was visible in his joints as the wind ruffled to the loose strands of blonde hair. His whole life had graciously changed in such little time that he still couldn't believe the situations he was in. A Japan program originating around heroes wanted him to represent them for a reason hidden expertly behind a board of directors and a carefully scripted role. However, the days of him being alone, driven by nothing but pure desire to be something more than a forgotten boy discarded by society, reminded him of his goals. He was supposed to change Japan's imperfect system. Following the HPSC would help pursue his goals. There was no doubt in that. But, when he thought back to his brief encounter with All Might, he couldn't help but confide in the man's confidence in his endeavor to be a pillar of strength. Even so, he wasn't All Might. He didn't enjoy the majority of heroes, so there was no use in acting like somebody he didn't want to be. Naruto Uzumaki was a hero destined to the shadows, a polar opposite to All Might's constructive societal view. Even though he did share the same ideals of being a symbol, there were few ways he could move forward, and even if Hawks said he wouldn't have part in his choice, the path the winged hero built for himself didn't seem so far off from what he wanted. Seeing his boss start to disappear in the distance, Naruto began to fly after the number 3 hero, still going through the possible directions his life could go. Hosa City. Midoriya had come to Ida's rescue after the engine quirk user fought to gain vengeance for his brother's dismantling. Ingenium's brother lay paralyzed on the ground, just a few meters from where the one-for-all user stood staring defiantly, but barely restraining his fear for the figure across from him. After Gran Torino wanted the green-haired boy to gain experience, Izuku believed he would finally have a chance to prove himself in a different light. Under the tutelage of the once top 10 hero, Midoriya gained a semblance of control over One for All, causing his first form of full calling to top out at 5%. But, unexpectedly, the tandem ran into Nomus overtaking the Hosa station, making the elderly hero take action in confronting the aberrant creatures. However, Midoriya, wanting to help the hero, left the station in search of his mentor. That was when he came upon his fellow 1A classmate fighting the hero killer, Stain, in which Ida was rendered motionless under the villain's quirk. Another brat, huh? You're no heroes. I won't lose to greenhorns who will never be true heroes, just like your little friend there who seeks revenge. You two have no astounding qualities. The man unsheathed a ninjato and disappeared at a speed unfamiliar to the UA student, spreading One for All throughout his entire body. Midoriya deflected the stabbing motion of the sword and sent a leg sweep for the man's midsection. Stain raised a block just in time to receive the brunt of the attack, sending him reeling back but ultimately in control. Izuku readied himself. I will stop you from hurting any of my friends. I won't allow it. Green electricity surrounded his limbs, boiling his insides as he felt his power gradually increase. The red-masked villain shook his head disappointingly. All you heroes are so one-dimensional. It's truly disgusting. It doesn't matter if you strive to beat me, because only someone like All Might, or even that Uzumaki boy could ever be capable enough. The green-haired youth frowned as he tensed his muscles waiting for the reptilian-looking man to attack. Uzumaki? Naruto Uzumaki? The green-haired teenager thought confusingly. The man grinned savagely at the teenager, getting cold sweats to drip off Izuku's face. I will succeed, because no one is like me. They don't have the guts to stay true to their ideals. Because someone like you, who wants to be a great hero, has nothing of sustenance. Don't get me wrong, I despise the want to hurt children, but you give me no choice because you are interfering with my purpose. Prepare yourself. Stain threw a combat knife towards the ninth successor, licking his lips as he did so. Suddenly, a tidal wave of flames lit the alley to his right, alerting him to something attacking his flank. Jumping back onto a pile of rubble behind him, the wild untamed or orange flames passed over, revealing another UA student. Midoriya, I received your call. This place was hard to track down. Shoto Todoroki's flames seemed to be in better control as he shrugged them off his hero outfit. Midoriya grinned happily at his backup, knowing he had a better chance with Todoroki backing him up. Thank you, Todoroki-kun. Make sure he doesn't draw blood. His quirk can paralyze you if he ingests even the smallest drop. The heterochromia boy nodded, his eyesight never leaving the villain. Now this is just infuriating. No matter, you brats are nothing compared to me. Stain extended his sword to his side. Come UA Gakis. Show me if you have what it takes to be a hero. He yelled at the UA students who instantly attacked in conjunction.